Greetings, dear viewers. You're watching H. Potter. We have prepared something special for you today. What if Dobby revealed Harry was the prophesied elf friend at age 4 and every house elf chose him over their masters? Your likes and subscriptions keep this channel alive. If you enjoy our content, please show your support. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. Chapter 1. The boy who befriended Dobby's fingers trembled as he clutched the ancient scrap of parchment hidden beneath the loose floorboard in the Malfoy Manor pantry. His tennis ball eyes grew even wider as he traced the faded elvish script for the 100th time since discovering it while cleaning last winter. The friend shall come when magic's balance falters, he whispered to himself in the pre-dawn darkness. Born as the 7th month dies, marked by darkness yet untouched by its corruption. The friend shall know us by our true names and set free what has long been bound. The little house elf tucked the parchment away and resumed polishing silverware. His ears twitched nervously at every creak in the ancient manor. Master Lucius had been particularly cruel lately, taking out his frustrations on Dobby after the ministry rejected another of his donations. Dobby had the burns on his hands to prove it. But something felt different today. A strange magic hummed in Dobby's core, a resonance he'd never felt before. It pulled him eastward like an invisible thread, tugging at something ancient in his blood. Dobby must check, he murmured, setting down the silver. Just quickly. Master will not wake for hours. House elf magic wasn't like wizard magic. It didn't need wands or incantations, just intention and need. Dobby closed his eyes, focused on the pulling sensation, and vanished with a soft pop. He reappeared on a perfectly ordinary street lined with perfectly identical houses. The sun was just peeking over the horizon, painting Privet Drive in pale gold light. Dobby's bare feet settled on the damp grass of number 4's front lawn as the magical pull grew stronger. The friend is here. Dobby whispered incredulously. In a muggle dwelling? Wizard children were rarely awake at this hour, but the friend was different. Dobby could sense him moving inside, not upstairs in a bedroom, but in the kitchen. Curiosity overwhelmed caution. Dobby snapped his fingers, rendering himself invisible to muggle eyes, and approached the window. What he saw made his blood boil. A tiny boy with wild black hair stood on a wobbling chair, struggling to manage a frying pan nearly half his size. The child couldn't have been older than 4, yet here he was cooking breakfast while a walrus of a man bellowed from the table. Don't you dare burn the bacon again, boy. Your aunt and Dudley deserve a proper breakfast. Yes, Uncle Vernon, the child replied softly, his voice barely audible. Dobby pressed closer to the glass. The boy turned slightly, revealing a thin face with brilliant green eyes and, Dobby nearly fell backward, a lightning-shaped scar on his forehead. Harry Potter, Dobby breathed. The boy who lived is the friend. The prophecy suddenly made perfect sense. Born as July died. Marked by darkness. It had to be him. Inside, the boy lost his balance. The pan tilted dangerously, and a strip of bacon slid onto the floor. You useless freak. Vernon roared, rising from his chair with alarming speed for a man his size. Something in Dobby snapped. Before he could reconsider, he apparat directly into the kitchen with a loud crack that made Vernon Desley freeze mid-stride. You will not hurt Harry Potter. Dobby declared, placing himself between Harry and his uncle. Vernon's face cycled rapidly through shades of red to purple. What the devil are you? He sputtered, backing away. Harry stared in wonder from his perch on the chair, eyes wide behind taped-together glasses. Hello, he said simply, as though house elves appeared in his kitchen every day. Dobby turned and looked up at the boy. Their eyes met, and the elf felt an ancient magic activate, a recognition that transcended language. Dobby, Harry said, though Dobby had never introduced himself. The house elf felt his magical bindings to the Malfoy family disintegrate like cobwebs in fire. Tears welled in his enormous eyes. The friend knows Dobby's true name, he whispered reverently. Vernon Desley found his voice. Get out of my house, you you monster. He lurched forward, but Dobby raised a hand. Vernon found himself frozen in place, unable to move or speak, though his eyes bulged with panic. Harry Potter must come with Dobby, the elf said urgently. Harry Potter is not safe here. Harry Potter is the elf friend of prophecy. What's a prophecy? Harry asked, climbing down from his chair. He seemed remarkably unafraid. And what's an elf friend? The greatest of wizards, Dobby explained, his voice rising with excitement. The one who will free all elves and restore balance to magic. Harry's forehead crinkled. I'm not a wizard. Uncle Vernon says there's no such thing as magic. I'm just Harry. Just Harry is magical. Just Harry defeated the Dark Lord. Just Harry is the friend who will change everything. Dobby's excitement was interrupted by another crack as a second house elf appeared in the kitchen. This one wore a tea towel emblazoned with the Hogwarts crest. I felt the calling, she squeaked, staring at Harry with the same reverence Dobby had shown. The friend has awakened. Harry looked between the two elves in bewilderment. Hello, he said again, offering a small wave. Pinky, he added, somehow knowing her name too. The Hogwarts elf dropped to her knees. The friend knows Pinky's true name. Pinky is free to serve the friend. 3 more cracks echoed through the kitchen as more house elves appeared. Vernon Dursley's frozen face was now turning blue with suppressed rage and fear. From upstairs came Petunia's shrill voice, Vernon. What's that noise? Is everything all right? Harry Potter must come now, Dobby insisted, taking the boy's small hand. It is not safe. But where will we go? Harry asked, surprisingly calm for a child whose world was turning upside down. Before Dobby could answer, the kitchen door flew open, and Petunia Dursley screamed. The sight of 5 house elves surrounding her nephew was apparently too much for her. She collapsed in a dead faint. Blimey, Harry whispered. The new arrivals introduced themselves, Nipsey from the Bones family, Gorick from Gringotts Bank, and Hobble from the Abbots. Each one knew instantly that Harry was the prophesied friend, and each felt their magical bindings dissolve upon Harry speaking their true names. We must take Harry Potter to safety, Gorick declared. The wizards will not understand what is happening. Wizards? Harry's eyes widened. There really are wizards. Harry Potter is a wizard. Dobby squeezed his hand. The greatest wizard. But I can't do magic, Harry protested. As if in response to his words, the frying pan behind him suddenly lifted off the stove and floated gently to the counter, narrowly missing Vernon's purple face. Harry Potter does magic without even trying, Pinky said proudly. Just as the prophecy foretold. More cracks filled the air as house elves continued to appear, first dozens, then scores. They filled the kitchen, spilled into the living room, and soon overflowed into the garden. Each one knew immediately that Harry was the friend, and each was freed when Harry somehow spoke their true name. What's happening? Harry asked, now perched on Dobby's shoulders as they moved outside to accommodate the growing crowd of elves. The great calling, Gorick explained solemnly. Every house elf in Britain feels it. The friend has awakened, and we are answering. The neighbors were beginning to notice. Curtains twitched along Privet Drive as Muggles caught glimpses of the strange creatures filling Number 4's garden. Someone had called the police, their siren wailing in the distance. This is bad, Nipsey squeaked. The Statute of Secrecy. We must protect Harry Potter, Dobby declared. And Harry Potter will protect us. Harry, for his part, looked overwhelmed but not frightened. He kept greeting each new elf by name, a name he somehow knew despite never having met them before. With each name spoken, another elf's magic was freed from compulsory service. Mipsy. Dribble. Nookie. Flopsy. Within an hour, over 300 house elves had gathered on and around Privet Drive. Muggle authorities were establishing a perimeter, and news helicopters circled overhead. It was rapidly becoming the largest breach of the statute of secrecy in modern history. The ministry will come soon, warned an elderly elf named Crumple, who had served the Minister of Magic himself until 10 minutes ago. They will try to take the friend. They shall not, chorused dozens of elves, raising their hands defensively. Harry looked at the sea of devoted faces surrounding him and felt something he'd never experienced before: belonging. These strange creatures knew him, cared for him, wanted to protect him. It was the opposite of everything he'd known at the Dursleys. "Are you really my friends?" he asked tentatively. "We are more than friends, Harry Potter," Dobby replied solemnly. "We are bound not by magic now, but by choice. The friend does not command, the friend leads, and we follow freely." A series of loud cracks announced the arrival of wizards in dark robes, obliviators from the ministry, accompanied by aurors with wands drawn. "Merlin's beard!" exclaimed a witch with a monocle. "There must be 300 elves here." "Madam Bones," squeaked Nipsey, who until recently had served her family. "We serve the friend now." "What friend? What are you talking about?" The witch spotted Harry sitting atop Dobby's shoulders. "Is that, it can't be, Harry Potter." The elves moved protectively closer around Harry. "Stand aside," ordered a tall wizard. "By order of the Ministry of Magic, we're taking the boy into protective custody." "The friend stays with us," Dobby said firmly. "We stay with the friend." "This is madness," the wizard muttered. "Elves don't behave like this. They obey their masters." "We have chosen our master," Gorick replied. "And he has set us free to choose." More wizards appeared, including a tall man with a silver beard and half-moon spectacles. Harry immediately felt the power radiating from him. "Harry," the old man said gently, approaching slowly. "My name is Albus Dumbledore. I was a friend of your parents." The elves parted reluctantly to let Dumbledore approach, though they watched him warily. "You knew my parents?" Harry asked eagerly. "I did indeed," Dumbledore replied, crouching to meet Harry's eyes as Dobby reluctantly lowered him to the ground. "Lily and James were exceptional people." "They didn't die in a car crash, did they?" Harry asked shrewdly. Dumbledore's eyes flashed with anger, quickly masked. "No, Harry, they did not. There is much you should know, but perhaps this isn't the best place." He glanced around at the circle of elves, the ministry officials, and the Muggle police and news crews being held back at the end of the street. "I'm not going back to the Dursleys," Harry said firmly, with a conviction surprising in one so young. "No," Dumbledore agreed after a moment, "I don't believe you are." "And my friends come with me," Harry added, gesturing to the elves. Dumbledore's eyebrows rose. "All of them?" "All who want to," Harry clarified. Dobby stepped forward. "We all want to, Professor Dumbledore, sir. We are bound to the friend not by magic but by choice." Dumbledore studied the house elf curiously. "And who might you be?" "Dobby, sir. Former elf of the Malfoy family." This caused a stir among the ministry officials. "Malfoy's elf has abandoned him?" Madam Bones asked incredulously. "Do you know what this means, Albus? If house elves are abandoning their families, it's a violation of magical contracts," sputtered a red-faced wizard. "These creatures are bound by ancient magic. Magic that predates your ministry, fudge," Dumbledore replied calmly. "Magic that, it seems, has found an exception." He turned back to Harry. "May I ask, Harry, how you've managed to inspire such loyalty from so many elves so quickly?" Harry shrugged. "I just said hello and their names. I dunno how I knew their names, I just did." Dumbledore's eyes twinkled with interest. "Fascinating. And most unusual." More cracks announced the arrival of yet more wizards, and more elves. The situation was rapidly spiraling beyond anyone's control. "We need to move Harry to a secure location," Madam Bones insisted. This is the biggest breach of the statute of secrecy in decades. I believe you're right, Amelia, Dumbledore agreed. He turned to Harry. Would you be willing to come with me, Harry? You and your friends. I promise you'll be safe, and we can sort this all out properly. Harry considered this, looking to Dobby for guidance. The elf nodded slightly. Professor Dumbledore is a great wizard, Harry Potter. Not as great as the friend, but trustworthy. Okay, Harry agreed. But you promise I don't have to go back to the Dursleys? You have my word, Dumbledore said solemnly. What followed was perhaps the most complex mass apparition ever attempted. House elves could bring humans along when they operate, but coordinating hundreds of elves to transport themselves and ministry personnel while leaving no trace behind was unprecedented. Everyone clear on the destination? Madam Bones called out. Hogwarts gates. Dobby took Harry's hand. Hold tight, Harry Potter. Apparition feels strange the first time. Harry nodded, squeezing the elf's hand. I'm ready. The last thing Harry saw before the crushing sensation of apparition took him was Uncle Vernon's purple face pressed against the kitchen window, his mouth still frozen in a silent scream of rage. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry had stood for over 1,000 years, its ancient stones witness to countless magical events. But even Hogwarts had never seen anything like the arrival of Harry Potter and his army of house elves. They materialized just outside the castle gates in a series of pops that sounded like rapid gunfire. Harry stumbled, feeling queasy from the magical transport, but dozens of tiny hands steadied him instantly. Is Harry Potter okay? Dobby asked anxiously. Yeah, Harry managed, taking deep breaths. Just dizzy. He looked up and gasped. A massive castle loomed before him, its towers reaching toward the clouds, windows glinting in the morning sun. It was like something from a fairy tale, the kind of book Aunt Petunia never let him read. Welcome to Hogwarts, Harry, Dumbledore said, appearing beside him with a faint pop. Your parents' school, and someday, yours as well. It's brilliant, Harry whispered. The house elves murmured in agreement, though many had seen Hogwarts before. Some had even worked there, but now they clustered around Harry, clearly uncertain about their next steps. We should go to my office, Dumbledore suggested, eyeing the growing crowd with a mixture of fascination and concern. Though I'm not certain we'll all fit. The room of requirement would accommodate us, suggested a wrinkled old elf named Tippy. Dumbledore's eyebrows rose. You know about the come-and-go room? House elves know many secrets of Hogwarts, Professor Dumbledore, Tippy replied with dignity. The headmaster chuckled. Indeed, I imagine you do. Very well, the room of requirement it is. As they walked through the grounds toward the castle, Harry noticed something odd. The elves were walking differently, heads higher, shoulders straighter than when they'd first appeared in Privet Drive. Even their ears seemed more perky. Why do you look different? He asked Dobby. The elf beamed. We are free, Harry Potter. Free elves stand tall. Were you not free before? Several elves exchanged glances. House elves are bound to wizard families, Gorick explained. We must obey our masters in all things. Like slaves? Harry asked, frowning. House elves are not slaves, said a haughty-looking ministry wizard walking nearby. They need the magical bond to survive. That's not true, Harry replied instantly, though he couldn't have explained how he knew. They need magic, but not servitude. The wizard scowled at being contradicted by a 4-year-old, but several elves were nodding vigorously. The friend understands elf magic, Dobby said proudly. Just as the prophecy foretold. What exactly is this prophecy? Madam Bones asked. I've never heard of any elf-friend prophecy. It is not wizard prophecy, Crumple explained. It is elf prophecy, passed down through generations of house elves. The friend shall come when magic's balance falters, born as the 7th month dies, marked by darkness yet untouched by its corruption. The friend shall know us by our true names and set free what has long been bound. There was a moment of silence as the wizards absorbed this. Sounds rather like another prophecy I'm familiar with, Dumbledore murmured, giving Harry a thoughtful look. They had reached the castle now, its massive doors swinging open seemingly of their own accord. Harry gaped at the enchanted ceiling of the entrance hall, the moving staircases, the talking portraits that pointed and whispered as their unusual procession passed. "Is this real?" he asked Dobby. "Or am I dreaming?" "It is very real, Harry Potter," Dobby assured him. "This is the world where you belong." They climbed to the 7th floor, where Tippy showed them how to summon the Room of Requirement. A door materialized in the blank wall, and they entered a space that resembled a vast assembly hall with a comfortable seating area at one end for the humans and cushions scattered everywhere for the elves. "Now then," Dumbledore said once everyone was settled, "I believe we have quite a situation to unravel." He conjured a child-sized armchair for Harry, who sat down with Dobby standing protectively at his side. Ministry officials arranged themselves nearby, many still casting disbelieving looks at the hundreds of house elves who had made themselves comfortable around the room. "First," Dumbledore continued, "I must ask, Harry, are you all right? This must be very confusing for you." Harry considered this. "The past few hours had certainly been strange, but I'm okay. Better than okay, actually. I've got friends now." He smiled at the elves around him, who beamed back adoringly. "I'm glad to hear it," Dumbledore said gently. "But I'm concerned about your living situation. The Dursleys were supposed to be taking care of you." Harry's smile faded. "They don't like me much. They locked Harry Potter in a cupboard," Dobby interjected angrily. "Made him cook like a house elf. Threatened to hurt him." Dumbledore's face darkened, and several of the Ministry witches gasped. "Is this true, Harry?" Madame Bones asked sharply. Harry nodded, suddenly finding the floor very interesting to look at. "My cupboard's not so bad," he mumbled. "I'm used to it." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as Dumbledore's magic responded to his anger. "I see," the old wizard said quietly. "It seems I have made a grave error in judgment." He took a deep breath, visibly composing himself. "You have my word, Harry, that you will never return to that house." "But where will I go?" Harry asked, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. "I haven't got anyone else." "You've got us, Harry Potter," Dobby declared, and hundreds of elves voiced their agreement. "While I appreciate your loyalty," Dumbledore said carefully, "we must consider what's best for Harry. He needs proper guardianship, education, protection. We can protect the friend." Gorick interrupted fiercely. "House elf magic is powerful. And we can teach Harry Potter," added Pinky. "Elves know many kinds of magic wizards have forgotten." "This is absurd," sputtered Cornelius Fudge, the red-faced wizard from earlier. "The boy can't be raised by house elves. Think of the scandal." "I'm more concerned about the precedent," said a severe-looking witch. "If house elves can simply abandon their magical contracts, it undermines the very foundations of wizard-elf relations." "Perhaps those foundations need examining," Dumbledore suggested mildly. Before the argument could escalate, the doors to the Room of Requirement burst open. Lucius Malfoy strode in, his face contorted with rage, his black cloak billowing behind him. "Where are my elves?" he demanded, scanning the room. His eyes landed on Dobby, who flinched but held his ground beside Harry. "You! What have you done?" "Dobby serves Harry Potter now," the elf declared, though his voice trembled slightly. "Dobby is free." "Free?" Lucius snarled. "House elves are not free. They are property." Harry stood up, his small face suddenly fierce. "They're not things. They're people." Lucius turned his cold gaze on Harry, recognition dawning. "Potter," he spat. "I might have known you'd be at the center of this disruption." "Mr. Malfoy," Dumbledore interjected smoothly, as you can see, we are dealing with an unprecedented magical event. It seems young Harry here is the subject of an ancient house elf prophecy. Prophecy? Lucius scoffed. What nonsense is this? I demand the return of my property immediately. We're not going back, said another Malfoy elf, stepping forward despite his obvious fear. The friend has freed us. Lucius drew his wand, but before he could cast a spell, he found himself facing a wall of house elves, their own magic crackling around their fingertips. You would threaten me? He asked incredulously. You forget your place. Our place is with the friend, Dobby said firmly. Madame Bones stepped between Lucius and the elves. Put your wand away, Malfoy. Drawing a wand in these circumstances could be construed as an act of aggression. Lucius's face twitched with barely controlled rage, but he slowly lowered his wand. The Wizengamot will hear about this, he promised. Every one of you. His eyes lingered on Harry with naked hatred before he turned and stormed out. An uncomfortable silence followed his departure. Well, Fudge said finally, this is clearly a complex legal situation. The Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures will need to be consulted, of course. I'm not a thing to be regulated, Harry said quietly, but with surprising firmness for a 4-year-old. Of course not, my boy, Fudge blustered. But the elves are with me, Harry finished. They chose me, and I choose them. The simple logic of a child, delivered with absolute conviction, left the minister temporarily speechless. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled. It seems to me, he said thoughtfully, that we are witnessing something truly extraordinary. Perhaps, rather than trying to force this situation into existing frameworks, we should consider what it might teach us. That's all very philosophical, Albus, Madame Bones said dryly, but we have practical concerns. Where will Harry live? How do we handle hundreds of house elves suddenly without masters? What about the statute of secrecy breach in Surrey? One thing at a time, Amelia, Dumbledore replied. The Obliviators can handle the Muggles in Surrey. As for Harry's living arrangements. He paused, considering. I believe I have a solution, at least temporarily. He turned to Harry. Would you be comfortable staying here at Hogwarts for now? It's quite empty during summer holidays, but there are staff members present who could help look after you. Harry's eyes lit up. I could live in a castle. Indeed, Dumbledore chuckled. We have plenty of room, even for your many friends. But the school charter clearly states, began the severe-looking witch. The charter also gives the headmaster discretion in extraordinary circumstances, Dolores, Dumbledore interrupted gently. I would say this qualifies. And the elves? Fudge pressed. If I may, Minister, Gorick said, stepping forward with a respectful bow. We house elves do not seek to disrupt wizarding society. We only wish to serve the friend and help him fulfill his destiny. Which is what, exactly? Fudge asked skeptically. To restore balance to magic, Gorick replied simply. Too long have magical beings been divided into hierarchies. The friend will unite us. Fudge looked like he'd bitten into something sour. Sounds like revolutionary talk to me. I prefer to think of it as evolutionary, Dumbledore suggested. Magic has always adapted and changed throughout history. The debate continued for hours. Ministry officials argued legal precedents and magical contracts, while Dumbledore calmly deflected their more reactionary proposals. Through it all, Harry remained surprisingly patient for a 4-year-old, though he occasionally whispered questions to Dobby. Finally, a temporary compromise was reached. Harry would stay at Hogwarts under Dumbledore's guardianship while the Wizengamot considered the unprecedented legal questions raised by the mass liberation of house elves. The elves would be permitted to stay with Harry if they chose, but they would assist with the running of Hogwarts in exchange for their accommodation. As the ministry officials filed out, many muttering darkly about the implications of the day's events, Dumbledore approached Harry and Dobby. It's been quite a day, he said kindly. You must be tired, Harry. Now that he mentioned it, Harry realized he was exhausted. He nodded sleepily. Dobby will show Harry Potter to a proper bedroom, the elf said. With a proper bed, not a cupboard. Thank you, Dobby, Dumbledore said. I think the room of requirement can provide suitable accommodation for tonight. Tomorrow we'll arrange something more permanent. He crouched down to meet Harry's eyes. I want you to know, Harry, that while I didn't anticipate any of today's events, I am very glad you're no longer with the Dursleys. I placed you there for your protection, but I see now that was a mistake. I hope you can forgive an old man's error in judgment. Harry wasn't entirely sure what Dumbledore was talking about, but he nodded anyway. Sakai. I'm happier now. Dumbledore smiled, though his eyes remained sad. Rest well, Harry. We have much to discuss tomorrow, but for now, you've had enough surprises for one day. As Dumbledore left, the room of requirement transformed around them. The large assembly hall shrank into a cozy dormitory with a child-sized four-poster bed for Harry and hundreds of comfortable elf-sized sleeping nooks arranged nearby. Is this really happening? Harry asked Dobby as the elf helped him into pajamas that had appeared from nowhere. Am I really a wizard? Harry Potter is the greatest wizard, Dobby assured him, tucking him into bed. And tomorrow, Harry Potter begins his new life. As Harry drifted off to sleep, surrounded by beings who had chosen to follow him, who looked at him with admiration instead of disdain, he felt something unfamiliar swelling in his chest. It took him a moment to recognize it as happiness. The next morning brought fresh challenges. News of "the boy who befriended" had spread throughout the wizarding world overnight. The Daily Prophet's headline screamed, Harry Potter sparks House ELF rebellion. Beneath a grainy photo of Harry surrounded by elves at Privet Drive, apparently taken by a quick-thinking ministry official before the Muggle press arrived. Dumbledore had the paper tucked under his arm when he came to collect Harry for breakfast. The boy was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the floor with dozens of elves as they taught him a clapping game involving rapid hand movements and bursts of harmless magical sparks. Good morning, Harry, Dumbledore called cheerfully. I see you're making yourself at home. Harry jumped up, grinning. His hair was even messier than usual, but there was a healthy flush to his cheeks that had been absent the day before. Professor Dumbledore. Dobby and Pinky showed me how to make sparkles. He demonstrated with a clumsy movement that nonetheless produced a shower of golden sparks from his fingertips. Impressive, Dumbledore said, genuinely surprised. Wandless magic at your age is quite remarkable, even if it's a simple charm. House elf magic doesn't need wands, Harry explained earnestly. It just needs feeling and wanting. Indeed. Dumbledore looked thoughtfully at the elves. Perhaps wizards have more to learn from elves than we've acknowledged. He held up the newspaper. I'm afraid you've become quite famous overnight, Harry. Even more than you already were. Harry frowned at the paper. What's a rebellion? In this case, it's a rather exaggerated description of what happened yesterday, Dumbledore replied, setting the paper aside. But before we worry about that, let's get some breakfast, shall we? The other professors are eager to meet you. The great hall was mostly empty, with just the staff table occupied. Several teachers looked up with undisguised curiosity as Dumbledore entered with Harry and a contingent of elves. Colleagues, Dumbledore announced, may I present Harry Potter, who will be staying with us for the foreseeable future. A tiny wizard with a white beard jumped up on his chair to see better. Remarkable. He has Lily's eyes, doesn't he? Indeed he does, Phileas, Dumbledore agreed, guiding Harry to a seat. Harry, this is Professor Flitwick, who teaches charms. And here we have Professor McGonagall, Professor Sprout, Professor Sinistra. Harry tried to keep track of all the names, but there were too many new faces. He focused on eating the delicious breakfast that appeared before him, eggs, sausages, toast with raspberry jam, and a goblet of pumpkin juice that tasted strange but good. It's not healthy for a child so young to be surrounded by so many adults and no peers, observed a stern-looking witch with square glasses, Professor McGonagall, Harry reminded himself. Quite right, Minerva, Dumbledore agreed. I've been giving that some thought. Perhaps we might arrange playdates with some magical children Harry's age. The Weasleys have a boy about Potter's age, don't they? Suggested a plump witch with dirt under her fingernails. And Molly has experience with children. An excellent suggestion, Pomona, Dumbledore beamed. I shall speak with Arthur and Molly today. As the adults discussed Harry's future, Dobby and the other elves stationed themselves around the Great Hall. Some helped serve breakfast, falling into familiar routines, while others simply watched protectively over Harry. After breakfast, Dumbledore took Harry to his office, a circular room filled with strange silver instruments and portraits of old headmasters who peered down at Harry with interest. Have a seat, Harry, Dumbledore said, settling behind his desk. There are some things I need to explain to you. Over the next hour, Dumbledore gave Harry a simplified version of his history, his parents' deaths at the hands of a dark wizard named Voldemort, his survival and unwitting defeat of that wizard, and his subsequent placement with the Dursleys for his protection. Blood magic is very powerful, Dumbledore explained gently. Your mother's sacrifice created a protection that lives on in your aunt's blood, and in yours. But they don't love me, Harry said simply. Aunt Petunia always says I'm a burden. Dumbledore sighed heavily. I had hoped that family bonds would overcome prejudice. I was wrong, and I am truly sorry for that, Harry. Sockeye, Harry shrugged. I've got new family now. He glanced at Dobby, who had insisted on accompanying him to the headmaster's office. Yes, it seems you do, Dumbledore agreed, his eyes twinkling. Which brings us to the matter of this prophecy. Dobby, would you mind telling me exactly how you discovered it? Dobby stepped forward nervously. Dobby found an ancient parchment while cleaning Master Malfoy's library. It was hidden in a secret compartment in an old book about elf magic. Dobby cannot read human writing very well, but elf writing is different. The prophecy was written in the old elf script. Fascinating, Dumbledore murmured. May I see this parchment? Dobby's ears drooped. Dobby had to leave it behind when he felt the calling to find Harry Potter. I understand. Can you recite it again for me? Dobby nodded solemnly and repeated the prophecy. Dumbledore listened intently, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. Born as the 7th month dies, marked by darkness yet untouched by its corruption, he repeated thoughtfully. Very similar language to another prophecy concerning you, Harry. There's another prophecy about me? Harry asked, wide-eyed. Indeed there is, though its contents must remain secret for now, Dumbledore replied. When you're older, I promise to tell you everything. For now, let's focus on your immediate future. They discussed practical arrangements. Harry would have rooms in a guest suite near Gryffindor Tower, with accommodations nearby for the house elves who wished to stay close to him. He would begin magical education appropriate for his age, with different professors volunteering to teach him basics of their subjects. What about the other elves? Harry asked. The ones from other families? Many have already found roles here at Hogwarts, Dumbledore explained. The castle can always use helping hands, especially with 1,000 students arriving in September. But they're free now, Harry insisted. They should choose what they want to do. Dumbledore smiled. You're quite right, Harry. And they've chosen to follow you. But while they're here, it makes sense for them to do what they do best, doesn't it? Harry considered this. I guess so. But they should get paid, like people do for jobs. Dumbledore's eyebrows rose. That's a rather revolutionary concept in wizard-elf relations, Harry. Most house elves don't want payment. Do you want payment? Harry asked Dobby directly. The elf looked horrified for a moment, then thoughtful. Dobby has never considered it. Dobby serves the friend because it is an honor. But you should have your own money, Harry persisted. For things you want. What would Dobby want that Harry Potter would not provide? The elf asked, genuinely puzzled. Harry frowned, trying to articulate concepts that were advanced for a 4-year-old. It's about choosing. Being free means choosing for yourself. Dumbledore watched this exchange with fascination. You have a remarkable perspective for one so young, Harry. Perhaps we all have something to learn from your friendship with the elves. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the office door. Professor McGonagall entered, looking harried. Albus, the Malfoys, Knots, Parkinsons, and half a dozen other families are in the entrance hall demanding to see you. Lucius is threatening legal action against the school for harboring stolen property. Dumbledore sighed. I suppose this confrontation was inevitable. Minerva, would you mind taking Harry to meet Hagrid? I think he'd enjoy seeing the grounds, and Hagrid has been beside himself with excitement since hearing Harry is here. McGonagall nodded briskly. Come along, Potter. Let's leave the headmaster to deal with these visitors. Harry followed her reluctantly, Dobby and several other elves trailing behind. As they descended the spiral staircase, Harry could hear raised voices from the entrance hall below. This is an outrage, Dumbledore. My family has owned those elves for generations. The bond between house elf and family is sacred. You can't simply, where is Potter? I demand to speak with him. McGonagall steered Harry quickly down a side corridor. Best to avoid that lot, she said crisply. Particularly the Malfoys. Why don't they like me? Harry asked, trotting to keep up with her long strides. McGonagall's expression softened slightly. It's complicated, Potter. Some wizarding families. Well, they have certain views about blood purity and the natural order of things. Your very existence challenges those views. Because I'm the friend? That, and other reasons we'll discuss when you're older, she replied, pushing open a heavy door that led onto the grounds. Outside, Harry forgot the angry wizards as he took in the full splendor of Hogwarts in daylight. The castle rose majestically against a clear blue sky, its stones gleaming in the summer sun. The grounds rolled down to a sparkling lake, and beyond that stood a dark, mysterious forest. Wow, he breathed. McGonagall's mouth twitched in what might have been a smile. It is rather impressive, isn't it? Hogwarts has been home to young witches and wizards for over 1,000 years. She led him down a path toward a small stone hut near the forest edge. A massive figure was working in a garden patch beside it, taller and broader than any man Harry had ever seen. Hagrid, McGonagall called. I've brought a visitor. The giant man turned, revealing a wild black beard and beetle-black eyes that crinkled as he broke into an enormous smile. Harry, he boomed, crossing the garden in 3 huge strides. Last time I saw ya was just a tiny baby. Before Harry could react, he found himself swept up in a bone-crushing hug that lifted him clear off the ground. Careful, Hagrid, McGonagall cautioned. He's quite small. Right, sorry, Hagrid said, setting Harry down gently. His eyes were suspiciously moist. Just can't believe you're here. Yeah, look just like James, but Yevi got Lily's eyes. You knew my parents too? Harry asked eagerly. Course I did. Wonderful people, the best there ever was. Hagrid wiped his eyes with a tablecloth-sized handkerchief. Come in, come in. I've got rock cakes fresh baked this morning. McGonagall winced slightly. Don't feel obligated to eat too many, Potter, she murmured as Hagrid ushered them inside. The hut was small but cozy, with hams and pheasants hanging from the ceiling and a massive bed in one corner. A boarhound the size of a small pony bounded up to Harry, who flinched momentarily before the dog began enthusiastically licking his face. Down, Fawn! Hagrid ordered. Sorry 'bout that. He's friendly, just don't know his own size. It's okay, Harry giggled, patting the dog's enormous head. I like him. The house elves had followed them inside, looking around curiously at Hagrid's rustic dwelling. Fawn sniffed at them with interest. So it's true then, Hagrid said, serving tea in buckets and rock cakes that lived up to their name. What they're sayin' about bein' some sort of elf prophet. The friend is not a prophet, Dobby corrected respectfully. The friend is a bridge between magical beings, foretold by our oldest prophecy. Hagrid scratched his beard. Interestin'. Always got on well with house elves myself. Hard workers, clever little things. Harry frowned. They're not things, they're people. Right are, Harry. Hagrid agreed hastily. No offense meant. As Harry nibbled cautiously on a rock cake, Hagrid regaled him with stories of his parents' school days, James's talent on the Quidditch pitch, Lily's gift for charms, the pranks the Marauders had played. What's Quidditch? Harry interrupted at one point. Hagrid looked scandalized. Ya don't know about Quidditch? Greatest wizardin' sport there is. Played on broomsticks, with 4 balls, and... He launched into an enthusiastic if somewhat confused explanation involving bludgers, snitches, and various fouls that left Harry wide-eyed with excitement. I want to try flying, he declared. All in good time, Potter, McGonagall said with a hint of a smile. Your father was an exceptional flyer. I wouldn't be surprised if you've inherited his talent. Their visit with Hagrid stretched into lunchtime. Harry was fascinated by everything, magical creatures, moving photographs of his parents, even the simple spell Hagrid used to relight his fire when it began to die down. Can I try that? Harry asked eagerly. Wand magic is different from elf magic, Harry Potter, Dobby explained. Wizards channel through wands, while elves channel through intent. But the friend bridges magics, Pinky added excitedly. Perhaps Harry Potter can do both. Before McGonagall could object, Harry had pointed his finger at the fire just as he'd seen Hagrid do with his umbrella, focusing his intent the way Dobby had taught him that morning. To everyone's astonishment, the flames leaped higher with a loud whoosh. Merlin's beard! Hagrid exclaimed. Wandless magic at his age. McGonagall was staring at Harry with an expression between shock and pride. We're going to need a specialized educational program, she murmured. This is unprecedented. The door to Hagrid's hut burst open, making everyone jump. A breathless Dumbledore stood in the doorway. Minerva, we need to return to the castle immediately, he said urgently. Cornelius has called an emergency session of the Wizengamot concerning Harry and the elves. We've been summoned to testify. McGonagall rose quickly. Surely they don't expect Potter to appear. He's only 4 years old. Unfortunately, they do, Dumbledore replied grimly. The law is specific about the presence of all involved parties in cases concerning magical binding contracts. But he's a child. A child at the center of what some are calling the greatest upheaval in magical society in centuries. Dumbledore crouched down to Harry's level. I'm sorry, Harry, but we need to take a little trip to London. The wizarding government wants to ask you some questions. Harry looked apprehensively at Dobby. Will you come with me? Dobby will not leave Harry Potter's side, the elf promised fervently. All the elves will accompany the friend, added Gorick. It is our right. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled despite the gravity of the situation. I believe the Wizengamot chamber is about to become rather crowded. The Ministry of Magic was a bewildering place for a 4-year-old. Harry clung to Dobby's hand as they navigated the crowded atrium, with its gleaming golden symbols overhead and the peacock blue ceiling far above. Wizards and witches stopped and stared as Harry passed, many pointing and whispering behind their hands. Is that Harry Potter? Look at all those elves. They say he's staging a revolution, just a child, dangerous precedent. Dumbledore led their party toward a bank of golden grills at the far end of the hall. Harry had never seen an elevator before and was fascinated by the magical contraption, especially when a disembodied female voice announced each floor they passed. Level 2, Department of Magical Law Enforcement, including the improper use of Magic Office, Auror Headquarters, and Wizengamot Administration Services. They exited into a corridor lined with doors. Wizards and witches in plum-colored robes hurried past, many giving Harry curious or hostile glances. "Stay close, Harry," Dumbledore instructed, guiding him toward a set of heavy oak doors at the end of the corridor. "The Wizengamot can be rather intimidating, but remember that I am here with you, and no one will be permitted to harm you." Harry nodded, though his heart was beating faster. The hundreds of house elves who had accompanied them were creating logistical challenges. Ministry officials were trying to direct them to a separate waiting area, but the elves refused to be separated from Harry. "The friend's protectors stay with the friend," Gorick insisted stubbornly. After several minutes of increasingly heated argument, a compromise was reached. A delegation of 12 elves including Dobby would accompany Harry into the chamber, while the rest would wait in an expanded antechamber nearby. As Harry approached the doors to courtroom 10, a flash of platinum blonde hair caught his attention. Lucius Malfoy stood conversing with a toad-like woman in pink. They both turned to stare as Harry passed, Lucius's face contorting with barely suppressed fury, the woman's with a sickly sweet smile that made Harry's skin crawl. "Chin up, Harry," Dumbledore murmured. "Remember who you are." The courtroom was a large dungeon-like space with stone benches rising on all sides, filled with witches and wizards in the plum-colored Wizengamot robes. A single chair stood in the center of the floor, chains draped ominously over its arms. "Absolutely not," Dumbledore said firmly when an official tried to direct Harry to the chained chair. "He is a child and a witness, not a criminal." After a tense standoff, a small table and chairs were conjured instead. Harry sat between Dumbledore and Professor McGonagall, with Dobby and the elf delegation standing protectively behind them. Minister Fudge, looking harried and uncomfortable, called the session to order. "Extraordinary meeting of the Wizengamot, August 3, 1984, he announced. "Called to address the unprecedented situation concerning Harry James Potter and the mass defection of house elves from their lawful masters." The next several hours were confusing for Harry. Various important-looking witches and wizards asked him questions that he did his best to answer honestly, though he didn't always understand what they were asking. Dumbledore frequently intervened when the questioning became too complex or aggressive. "Mr. Potter," said an elderly wizard with bushy eyebrows, "did you intentionally summon these house elves to you?" "No, sir," Harry replied. "They just started appearing after Dobby came." "And did you specifically command them to abandon their masters?" "I didn't command anything," Harry frowned. "I just said hello and their names." "Their names," repeated the wizard skeptically. "And how did you know their names, having never met them before?" Harry shrugged helplessly. "I just knew. Like the names were already in my head." Lucius Malfoy was called to testify next, his cold voice dripping with barely concealed hatred as he described the theft of his family's elves. "This is nothing less than a deliberate attack on our most sacred traditions," he declared. "House elves have served wizarding families for centuries under binding magical contracts. These contracts cannot simply be broken on a child's whim." "Yet they were broken," observed a witch with a monocle whom Harry recognized as Madame Bones. "How do you explain that, Mr. Malfoy?" "I cannot explain it," Lucius admitted stiffly. "Which is precisely why this situation is so dangerous. If ancient magic can be undone so easily, what other foundations of our society might crumble next?" The toad-like woman in pink, introduced as Dolores Umbridge, senior undersecretary to the minister, was particularly nasty in her questioning of the elves. "You creatures have always claimed to value your bonds with wizarding families," she said in a sickly sweet voice. "Yet you abandoned centuries of tradition for a 4-year-old boy. Why should we believe this isn't some form of mass confundus charm or imperious curse?" "We are not confunded," Gorick replied with dignity. "We have chosen freely for the first time." "The friend awakened what was long forgotten," added Pinky. "The ancient bond that predates wizard-elf contracts." "And what exactly is this ancient bond?" Umbridge pressed. The elves exchanged glances. "Before wizards bound elves with contracts," Dobby explained hesitantly, "elves and wizards work together as equals. The friend restores this balance." A murmur ran through the Wisengamot at this statement. Preposterous, shouted an elderly wizard. House elves have always served wizards. That is wizard history, Gorik replied boldly. Elf history remembers differently. More uproar followed this pronouncement. Fudge banged his gavel repeatedly, calling for order. As the day wore on, Harry grew increasingly tired and confused. The legal arguments flew over his head, and the hostile stares from many of the Wisengamot members made him uncomfortable. By late afternoon, he was fighting to keep his eyes open. Dumbledore noticed his fatigue. "Minister," he interrupted firmly, "I must point out that you are subjecting a 4-year-old child to an inquisition that would exhaust most adults. I suggest we adjourn for the day and continue with just the legal experts present tomorrow." Fudge looked relieved at the suggestion. Yes, quite right. This session of the Wisengamot is adjourned until 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. As they rose to leave, Lucius Malfoy swept past, pausing briefly beside Harry. "Enjoy your moment in the spotlight, Potter," he murmured, too quietly for others to hear. "It won't last." Harry shrank back against Dobby, who glared defiantly at his former master. "Mr. Malfoy is leaving now," the elf said with unexpected authority. "Mr. Malfoy will not threaten the friend." Something passed between elf and wizard, some silent communication that made Lucius blanch slightly before recovering his composure and stalking away. "Come, Harry," Dumbledore said gently. "Let's return to Hogwarts. I believe you've had quite enough excitement for one day." Back at the castle, Harry was too exhausted for dinner in the Great Hall. Dobby brought food to his new quarters, a comfortable suite with a bedroom sized for a child, a small sitting room, and an adjoining dormitory for the elves who stayed closest to him. "Did I do okay?" Harry asked Dobby as the elf tucked him into bed. "Harry Potter was very brave," Dobby assured him. "The wizards ask difficult questions because they are afraid." "Afraid of me?" Harry asked incredulously. "But I'm just little." "Not afraid of Harry Potter," Dobby explained carefully. "Afraid of change. The old families have had power for many centuries. They do not wish to share it." Harry yawned widely. "That's silly. Sharing is good. Aunt Petunia always made Dudley share his second bedroom, even though he didn't want to." Dobby smiled sadly at the child's simple logic. "Harry Potter is wiser than many adult wizards. Now sleep, friend. Tomorrow will bring new challenges." As Harry drifted off, Dobby joined a council of elves meeting in the next room. Gorik, Pinky, Crumple, and other elder elves had gathered to discuss strategy. "The Wisengamot fears us," Gorik observed quietly. "They fear what the friend represents." "They should fear," said a grizzled old elf named Noddy. "For centuries they have bound us, diminished us, made us punish ourselves." "The friend does not seek revenge," Dobby reminded them. "The friend seeks balance." "Balance requires justice," Noddy argued. "The old families must answer for their cruelty." "This is not the way," Pinky interjected gently. "Violence and retribution will only confirm their fears. We must show them a better path." The debate continued late into the night, a historic moment, house elves freely discussing political strategy and the future of their kind, without masters to dictate their thoughts or punish their ambitions. In his bed, Harry slept peacefully, unaware of the revolution he had sparked or the powerful forces aligning against him. For now, he was simply a boy who had found friendship after years of neglect, a boy with an extraordinary destiny that was only beginning to unfold. Chapter 2, The houses divided. The morning after the Wisengamot hearing, the Daily Prophet landed on breakfast tables across Wizarding Britain with a headline that made toast drop from fingers and tea spill across tablecloths. Boy WHO Live declares himself the friend, ministry powerless as House ELF revolution continues. Below this screaming headline was a photo of tiny Harry Potter surrounded by determined-looking house elves, all glaring protectively at the camera. The article itself was a masterpiece of panic and speculation, painting Harry as either an innocent pawn or a dangerous revolutionary, depending on which paragraph you read. At Malfoy Manor, Lucius slammed the paper down on his breakfast table so hard that the fine china rattled. His normally pale face had gone blotchy with rage. "This is intolerable," he hissed to his wife Narcissa. "We've lost 4 generations of trained elves overnight, and the ministry does nothing but hold hearings." Narcissa sipped her tea with forced composure. "The Greengrasses lost 7, and the Knots lost their entire staff of 12. We're hardly alone, Lucius. That's precisely my point." He jabbed a finger at the article. "This affects every proper wizarding family. The very foundation of our society is under attack, and Fudge sits on his hands while Dumbledore makes excuses for the boy. What do you suggest?" Narcissa asked coolly. Lucius's eyes narrowed. "A coalition. The old families united against this aberration. Potter may be the boy who lived, but he's still just a child. And children can be managed." "Careful, Lucius," Narcissa cautioned. "Remember what happened to the last person who underestimated that particular child." Lucius waved dismissively. The Dark Lord's mistake was confronting the Potters directly. There are more subtle ways to handle this situation. He rose from the table, breakfast forgotten. "I'm calling an emergency meeting at the club. This ends now." Meanwhile at Hogwarts, Harry Potter remained blissfully unaware of the political storm he'd unleashed. He sat cross-legged on the floor of his new quarters, watching with wide-eyed fascination as Dobby and Pinky demonstrated basic cleaning charms. "Like this, Harry Potter," Dobby explained, snapping his fingers and causing a small pile of dust to gather itself and zoom into a waiting dustpan. "Elf magic feels the purpose and makes it happen." Harry concentrated hard, his little face scrunched in determination. He snapped his own fingers, and a few dust particles twitched but went nowhere. "I can't do it," he sighed. "The friend is learning," Pinky encouraged. "Wizard children don't usually do any magic until much older. Harry Potter is already ahead." "Why do you call me the friend?" Harry asked, distracted from his magical efforts. "My name's just Harry." The elves exchanged glances. "It is what the prophecy calls you," Gorick explained, joining them from where he'd been organizing a roster of castle duties with other elves. "The one who would know us by our true names and free us to choose." "But I don't understand how I knew your names," Harry said, frustration evident in his voice. "They just popped into my head when I saw you." "Ancient magic," Gorick said solemnly. "Older than Hogwarts. Older than wands." Harry was about to ask another question when a knock came at the door. Professor McGonagall entered, looking as prim and proper as ever despite the early hour. "Good morning, Mr. Potter," she said briskly. "I trust you slept well." Harry nodded, scrambling to his feet. "Yes, Professor. Dobby and Pinky were teaching me elf magic." "Indeed?" McGonagall's eyebrows rose slightly. "And how is that going?" "Not very good," Harry admitted. "I can't make the dust move properly." "Well, I wouldn't worry too much about household charms just yet," McGonagall said with the hint of a smile. "You'll have plenty of time for magical education. Speaking of which, the headmaster and I have worked out a preliminary schedule for you." She handed Harry a piece of parchment covered in neat writing. Having just turned 4, Harry could only recognize a few letters. "I can't read all of this," he admitted, embarrassed. "Quite understandable at your age," McGonagall assured him. "Basically, you'll have lessons each morning with various professors, beginning reading and writing with me, an introduction to magical plants with Professor Sprout, basic numbers with Professor Vector, and so on. Afternoons will be for play and exploration, with Hagrid or other staff supervising." Harry's eyes lit up. "Will I learn how to turn into a cat like you can?" McGonagall looked startled. "How did you know I'm an animagus?" Harry shrugged. "Dunno. Just knew when I looked at you, like with the elves' names." McGonagall exchanged a significant glance with Gorick. "Most unusual. I shall inform the headmaster." In any case, Mr. Potter, animagus transformation is extremely advanced magic. Perhaps when you're a bit older. Like 5? Harry asked hopefully. McGonagall's lips twitched. Perhaps a bit older than that. Now, the headmaster has returned to the ministry for the continuation of yesterday's hearing. In the meantime, he suggested you might enjoy a visit with some children your own age. Harry's eyes widened. Other kids? Here at Hogwarts? Indeed. Arthur and Molly Weasley have agreed to bring their younger children for a visit. They have a son almost exactly your age, and I believe you might find him a compatible playmate. Harry wasn't sure what compatible meant, but the idea of meeting another wizard kid his age was thrilling. The Dursleys had never allowed him to have friends. Dudley had made sure of that. When are they coming? He asked eagerly. After lunch, McGonagall replied. So you have time for your first lessons this morning. Shall we begin with some letters? The morning passed in a blur of new experiences for Harry. Professor McGonagall taught him to recognize and write several letters, praising his careful efforts. Professor Sprout showed him magical seedlings in a small greenhouse, letting him water baby bouncing bulbs that wriggled happily under the stream from his tiny watering can. Professor Flitwick demonstrated simple light charms that made Harry laugh with delight as colorful sparks danced around the room. Throughout it all, Dobby remained close at hand, with other elves cycling through to observe or assist. The Hogwarts professors had initially found this arrangement disconcerting, but they were gradually adjusting to the constant elf presence around Harry. After a lunch that featured more food than Harry had ever been allowed to eat at the Dursleys, McGonagall led him to a comfortable sitting room where a roaring fire offset the castle's perpetual chill. The room had been prepared with toys and games suitable for young children, including, Harry noticed excitedly, a tiny training broomstick that hovered just a foot off the ground. Now, Mr. Potter, McGonagall said, the Weasleys will be arriving via flow, that's travel through the fireplace, she explained, seeing his confusion. It might seem alarming the first time you see it, but I assure you it's perfectly normal for wizards. Harry nodded, though he couldn't imagine how people could travel through fire without getting burned. Before he could ask, the flames in the fireplace turned emerald green and rose higher. Harry stepped back in surprise as a tall, balding man with red hair stepped out of the flames, brushing soot from his worn robes. Arthur Weasley, the man introduced himself cheerfully, shaking McGonagall's hand. Absolutely fascinating business with the elves, Minerva. The ministry's in complete chaos, half the departments can't function without their usual staff. Before McGonagall could respond, the flames turned green again, and a plump woman with the same flaming red hair emerged, holding the hands of 2 small children. Molly Weasley, dear, she said warmly to Harry, who found himself enveloped in a hug before he quite knew what was happening. And this is Ron, who's just your age, and Ginny, who's a year younger. The boy named Ron was tall for his age, with a shock of red hair and a face full of freckles. He stared at Harry with undisguised curiosity. Are you really Harry Potter? He blurted. Ronald, his mother scolded. Manners. Sorry, Ron mumbled, his ears turning pink. But are you? Harry nodded. Yeah. Just Harry, though. Nice to meet you. The green flames whooshed again, and 2 more red-headed children tumbled out, identical twin boys who looked about 6 years old. Fred and George, Mrs. Weasley introduced them, who promised to be on their best behavior. This last part was delivered with a stern look at the twins, who grinned identically. Promise, Mum, they said in unison. I'll leave you to get acquainted, McGonagall said. Molly, Arthur, please make yourselves comfortable. The elves will bring tea. As if on cue, Dobby and 2 other elves appeared with a tea tray and a platter of cakes. The Weasley children stared openly. Blimey, said one of the twins. Are these the rebel elves from the paper? Fred. Mrs. Weasley hissed. I'm George, actually, the twin replied. And I was just asking. They're not rebels, Harry said, frowning. They're my friends. Wicked, Ron breathed, clearly impressed. We don't have an elf. Dad says they're expensive. Ronald. Mrs. Weasley looked mortified. I'm so sorry, she said to Dobby. Children say the strangest things. To her evident surprise, Dobby bowed respectfully. Dobby takes no offense, Mrs. Weasley. Young Master Weasley speaks truth. Wizard families pay many galleons for elf contracts. But that's not right, Harry insisted. People shouldn't be bought. An awkward silence followed this pronouncement. Arthur Weasley cleared his throat. Well. Perhaps the children would like to play while we adults have a chat. The ice broken, the Weasley children quickly lost their initial awe of Harry and the elves. Ron challenged Harry to a game of exploding snap, carefully explaining the rules. The twins explored the room, exclaiming over the toys and games available. Little Ginny, shy at first, soon joined in, though she watched Harry with wide-eyed fascination that made him slightly uncomfortable. Is it true you lived with muggles? Ron asked as they played. Harry nodded. My aunt and uncle. They're not very nice. Dad loves muggles, Ron confided. He collects plugs and batteries and stuff. Drives Mum mental. Your dad collects plugs? Harry asked, fascinated by the idea of someone finding Muggle objects interesting. Yeah, he works in the misuse of Muggle artifacts office at the Ministry. Says Muggles are ingenious for getting along without magic. Ron lowered his voice. Is it true you can do elf magic? Harry shrugged. I'm trying to learn, but it's hard. I made some sparks yesterday, though. Cool. Ron's eyes were wide with admiration. I've never done any magic yet. Fred turned my teddy bear into a spider once, but that was an accident. As the children played, the adults conversed in low voices by the fire, occasionally glancing at Harry and the elves. Causing absolute havoc at the Ministry, Arthur was saying. The Department of Magical Transportation lost 17 elves, the Floo networks backed up for days. St. Mungo's lost their entire cleaning staff. And the old families are furious, of course. Lucius Malfoy is organizing some sort of coalition, Molly added, her voice tight with disapproval. Been sending owls to everyone with a family name older than dirt, according to Perkins in Arthur's office. Albus anticipated as much, McGonagall sighed. He believes Malfoy will attempt to push through emergency legislation forcing the elves to return to their former masters. Can they do that? Molly asked, glancing at the elves who were helping the children with their game. Legally? It's unprecedented, Arthur replied. The binding contracts between families and elves are ancient magic, not Ministry regulations. If they've been broken by whatever connection Potter has with them. He trailed off, shaking his head in wonder. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion from the children. Harry had mounted the toy broomstick and was zooming around the room with surprising skill, Ron cheering him on while the twins provided enthusiastic commentary. And Potter executes a perfect turn, displaying the natural talent that will surely make him the youngest Seeker in a century, one twin announced in a mock broadcaster's voice. Look at that control, folks. The boy who befriended might just be the boy who flew like he was born on a broom, added the other. Harry. Be careful. Molly called, half rising from her chair. Harry Potter is safe, Dobby assured her, snapping his fingers subtly to cushion the air around Harry. Dobby will not let Harry Potter fall. Indeed, when Harry took a turn too sharply and slipped sideways off the broom, he seemed to bounce on invisible cushions before landing gently on his feet, giggling. Did you see that? He called to Ron. I nearly did a flip. McGonagall watched with a calculating look that Molly recognized immediately. Don't even think about it, Minerva, she warned. He's 4 years old. I'm simply observing that he has his father's natural talent, McGonagall sniffed. Nothing more. The playdate continued for several hours, with the children moving from the broomstick to magical building blocks to a wizarding board game called Crups and Measles that involved animated playing pieces chasing each other around the board. Harry was visibly delighted to have playmates who didn't run away from him, as they had when Dudley was around, or treat him with fearful reverence, as the elves sometimes did. As the afternoon wore on, however, Arthur kept checking a strange watch with multiple hands. "We should be going soon," he said eventually. "The hearing will be letting out, and I need to get back to the office." "Can't we stay longer?" Ron pleaded. "Harry was going to show me the giant squid." "Another time, dear," Molly said firmly. "Professor McGonagall and Harry have been very kind to host us, but we've imposed enough for one day." "You can come back, right?" Harry asked anxiously, suddenly afraid of losing his first real human friends. "Of course they can," McGonagall assured him. "Perhaps next week. And when you're a bit more settled, Mr. Potter, we might arrange for you to visit the Weasleys at their home." Ron brightened. "Yeah. You can come to the Burrow and see my room and play Quidditch in the orchard." The promise of future playdates made the goodbye less difficult. After the Weasleys departed in the same green flames they'd arrived in, Harry turned to McGonagall with a grin so wide it made his cheeks hurt. "I've never had friends before," he said simply. McGonagall's stern expression softened. "Well, Mr. Potter, I believe you'll find you have quite a few now." The Wisengamot hearing dragged on for 3 more days, with arguments growing increasingly heated. Dumbledore returned to Hogwarts each evening looking exhausted but grimly satisfied. "They're deadlocked," he explained to McGonagall over tea in his office, while Harry played quietly with magical toys nearby, Dobby watching over him. Half the Wisengamot insists the elves must be returned to their masters, the other half argues that if the magical contracts have been broken, new legislation can't simply reinstate them. "And what do the elves themselves say about all this?" McGonagall asked pointedly. "That's the fascinating part," Dumbledore's eyes twinkled despite his fatigue. "Gorick and several of the elder elves have been eloquently testifying about elf history and magic. Did you know that house elves weren't always bound to wizarding families? According to Gorick, the binding contracts began only after the elf wars in the 14th century. "I've never heard of any elf wars," McGonagall frowned. "Few have. It seems our magical history books have some significant omissions." Dumbledore glanced at Harry, who appeared absorbed in his toy hippogriff but was clearly listening to every word. "Most interesting of all is their insistence that young Harry here is the fulfillment of a prophecy that predates the binding contracts, a magical decree that even supersedes the contracts themselves." "Do you believe them?" McGonagall asked quietly. Dumbledore stroked his beard thoughtfully. "I believe they believe it. And given what we've witnessed, Harry knowing their true names, the spontaneous breaking of hundreds of magical bonds, there is clearly powerful magic at work that we don't fully understand." Harry looked up from his toys. "Professor Dumbledore? Am I in trouble for freeing the elves?" Dumbledore smiled gently. "No, Harry. You've done nothing wrong. You've simply revealed a complexity to magic that many wizards had forgotten, or chosen to ignore." "The nasty man with the long blonde hair thinks I'm in trouble," Harry observed. "He looks at me like Uncle Vernon when I did accidental magic." "Mr. Malfoy is protective of traditions," Dumbledore said diplomatically. "Change can be frightening, especially when it affects things we've taken for granted. But it's not fair to make the elves be servants if they don't want to be," Harry insisted. "A sentiment I wholeheartedly agree with," Dumbledore assured him. "Unfortunately, not everyone shares our perspective on fairness." The conversation was interrupted by a soft chime from one of Dumbledore's silver instruments. "Ah," he said, rising. "It seems we have a visitor approaching the gates. Minerva, would you mind taking Harry back to his quarters? I believe Lucius Malfoy would not be the best company for him at the moment." McGonagall quickly ushered Harry and Dobby out through a side door, just as they heard the main office door open and the unmistakable tap of Lucius Malfoy's cane on the stone floor. Back in his rooms, Harry found dozens of elves in a state of excitement. What's happening? He asked Gorick, who seemed to be coordinating some sort of effort. The friend's new home is being prepared, the elder elf explained. Hogwarts Castle has revealed a special place for Harry Potter and his elves. Revealed? Harry echoed, confused. Hogwarts has many secrets, Gorick said with a mysterious smile. The castle knows the friend has returned, and it provides. I don't understand, Harry admitted. Come, Gorick took his hand. We will show you. The elf led Harry through corridors he hadn't explored yet, up staircases and down passages, until they reached what appeared to be a blank wall on the third floor of the castle's east wing. This wasn't here yesterday, Gorick explained. The castle has created it specially. Created a wall? Harry asked skeptically. Gorick chuckled. Not just a wall, Harry Potter. Say your name to the stones. Feeling slightly foolish, Harry addressed the blank wall. Harry Potter. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the stones began to shift, rearranging themselves until they formed an archway leading into a space that definitely hadn't existed before. Harry gasped as he stepped through. He found himself in a circular room with a domed ceiling enchanted like the Great Hall to show the sky outside. Comfortable furniture sized for both humans and elves filled the space. Doorways led off to what looked like bedrooms, study areas, and even a small indoor garden where magical plants grew in orderly beds. The castle made this? Harry whispered in awe. Hogwarts knows the friend has come, Gorick repeated. This will be Harry Potter's true home, and ours. A place where elves and wizards live together, not as master and servant, but as friends. Harry walked around in wonder, exploring the space. There was a bedroom just his size with a four-poster bed sporting hangings in all four Hogwarts house colors. Another room held books and toys appropriate for a magical child. A third space resembled a classroom where, Gorick explained, Harry could continue his lessons without traveling through the castle. It's brilliant, Harry breathed. But I thought I was staying in the guest quarters. Those were temporary, Gorick explained. This is permanent, a true home for the friend and those who follow him. The castle made this, just for me. Harry found the concept almost too big to grasp. For the friend and what the friend represents, Gorick corrected gently. The return of balance to magic. Hogwarts itself was built on principles of cooperation between magical beings, principles that were later forgotten or ignored. Harry was about to ask more questions when Dobby appeared with a soft pop. Professor Dumbledore requests Harry Potter's presence, he announced. The nasty Malfoy man has gone, but important decisions must be made. Can it wait? Gorick asked. We were just showing Harry Potter his new home. Dobby shook his head. The Ministry has reached a decision about the elves. All must hear it. The Great Hall had been transformed into a makeshift assembly space. Hundreds of house elves gathered on one side, while the Hogwarts staff sat at their usual table. In the center stood Dumbledore, looking grave but composed. Ah, Harry, he called as Harry entered with Dobby and Gorick. Please join me. This concerns you directly. Harry walked nervously to Dumbledore's side, aware of all eyes upon him. The Ministry of Magic has reached a preliminary decision regarding the house elves, Dumbledore announced once Harry was in place. After much debate, the Wizengamot has determined that the magical contracts binding elves to wizarding families have indeed been broken by what they're terming an ancient magical intervention. A murmur ran through the assembled elves, mostly sounds of relief and joy. However, Dumbledore continued, raising a hand for silence, the Ministry is not prepared to recognize full independence for house elves without further study and legislation. They have proposed a compromise. The elves fell silent, watching warily. All house elves formerly bound to private families will be granted a provisional status of magical dependence under the guardianship of Harry Potter, or more precisely, under my guardianship as Harry's current magical guardian. Harry frowned. What does that mean? It means, Harry, that legally the elves are free from their former masters but not yet recognized as fully independent magical beings. They exist in a new category, bound not by magical contract but by their own choice to follow you. That doesn't sound fair, Harry said immediately. They should be free properly. Many in the Wisengamot agree with you, Dumbledore assured him. But centuries of tradition don't change overnight. This compromise prevents the old families from forcing the elves to return while creating space for new legislation to be developed. What about the elves who worked at the ministry? Or St. Mungo's? Or here at Hogwarts? Harry asked, surprisingly astute for his age. Those employed by institutions rather than families have a slightly different status, Dumbledore explained. They're being offered formal employment contracts, with payment, if they wish it. This caused a greater stir among the elves, with some looking horrified at the mention of payment while others seemed cautiously interested. The choice is yours, Dumbledore addressed the elves directly. Those who wish to return to their former positions, at the ministry, the hospital, or here at Hogwarts, may do so under new terms. Those who wish to remain directly in Harry's service may do so. And those who wish something else entirely are free to say so. The elves began talking among themselves in their high-pitched voices, creating a buzzing sound that filled the hall. This seems rather a lot to put on Harry, Professor McGonagall observed, coming to stand beside them. He's only just turned 4, Albus. I'm aware, Dumbledore sighed. It's far from an ideal situation. But the alternative was forcing the elves back into servitude, something I could not, in good conscience, allow. So what happens now? Harry asked, trying to understand. Now, Harry, we adapt, Dumbledore said simply. You will continue your education and adjustment to the wizarding world. The elves will explore what freedom means for them. And together, we'll navigate this new territory as best we can. Later that evening, after the elves had spent hours in council deciding their individual paths, Harry sat with Dobby, Gorick, and a dozen others in his new circular home. Many elves will work for Hogwarts properly now, Dobby explained to Harry. With days off and small payments. And some will work at St. Mungo's or the ministry, added Pinky. But as employees, not slaves. But you're staying with me? Harry asked, a touch of anxiety in his voice. Dobby will always stay with the friend, the elf assured him, patting his hand. Dobby, Gorick, Pinky, and many others will make our home here with Harry Potter. We will protect and teach the friend, and the friend will lead us toward the new balance. I don't know how to lead anyone, Harry admitted. I'm just little. The friend will grow, Gorick said confidently. And we will grow together in understanding. Over the next few weeks, a routine developed. Each morning, Harry had lessons with various professors, learning the basics of magic, reading, writing, and numbers. His progress was remarkable, whether from natural talent, the influence of the elves, or simply the attention he'd been denied at the Dursleys. Afternoons were for play and exploration. Sometimes the Weasley children visited, or Harry fled to the burrow under careful supervision. Ron quickly became his best human friend, the two boys bonding over wizarding chess, which Harry was terrible at, toy broomsticks, which Harry was brilliant at, and a shared sweet tooth. In the evenings, the elves would teach Harry their own form of magic, wandless, intuitive, based on feeling and intention rather than rigid incantations. To everyone's surprise, Harry showed an unusual aptitude for it. I've never seen anything like it, Professor Flitwick squeaked excitedly after watching Harry light a candle with just a gesture and focused intent. Most wizards can't perform controlled wandless magic until advanced training, if ever. Elf magic is different, Gorick explained patiently. We don't separate our magic from ourselves with wands. The friend bridges both traditions, wand magic and elf magic. This bridging became increasingly evident as Harry's magical education progressed. He could perform simple wizard spells with remarkable ease, but he could also execute basic elf magic, cleaning charms, minor levitation, finding lost objects, in a way that blended both traditions. Not everyone was pleased with these developments. The Daily Prophet regularly featured articles questioning whether Harry Potter was being properly raised, with quotes from concerned citizens, who just happened to be members of old pureblood families that had lost their elves. The boy needs proper wizarding guidance, insisted Narcissa Malfoy in one such piece. Being raised by house elves will only confuse his magical development and undermine our traditions. Lucius Malfoy was more direct in his criticism. This situation threatens the very foundations of magical society, he declared in a Wisengamot session. House elves have their place, and it is not as guardians to the boy who lived. I call for immediate legislation establishing proper wizarding guardianship for Potter and returning these elves to their rightful masters. Dumbledore skillfully blocked these political maneuvers, but the pressure was building. The Coalition for Magical Tradition that Lucius had formed now included 28 of the oldest wizarding families, all demanding the restoration of proper order. They won't give up, Arthur Weasley warned during one of his visits to check on Harry. Losing their elves was a blow to their pride as much as their convenience. And for some, like the Malfoys, there's the added concern of what those elves might reveal about their former households. You mean like the dark artifacts in the secret room under their drawing room floor? Harry asked innocently. Arthur nearly choked on his tea. What? How could you possibly know about that? Harry shrugged. Dobby told me. He had to clean it sometimes. Arthur and Dumbledore exchanged significant looks. Harry, Dumbledore said carefully, has Dobby told you other things about the Malfoys? Harry nodded. Lots of things. About the scary masks they keep, and the meetings they used to have with other bad wizards, and how Mr. Malfoy put a cursed book in someone's cauldron once that made really bad things happen. I think, said Dumbledore thoughtfully, we should have a conversation with Dobby about exactly what he observed while in the Malfoy's service. Arthur, perhaps the Department of Magical Law Enforcement would be interested. This new development added another layer to the already complex situation. As summer gave way to autumn, the political battle intensified. The coalition pressed for legislation requiring all house elves to be registered and regulated. Dumbledore and his allies countered with proposals for elf rights and formal recognition of their magical citizenship. Through it all, Harry continued to grow and learn, largely sheltered from the political storm by Hogwarts walls and the devoted elves who had made it their mission to give him the childhood he deserved. One crisp October morning, Harry woke to find Dobby looking unusually serious. What's wrong? He asked, sitting up and reaching for his glasses. Dobby must tell Harry Potter something important, the elf said solemnly. Something about why bad wizards fear the Friends so much. Harry slid out of bed, now fully awake. Is it about the prophecy? Dobby nodded, his large ears flapping. The elf prophecy is only part of the story. There is another prophecy, a wizard prophecy, about Harry Potter and the Dark Lord. Voldemort? Harry asked. Over the past months, he'd learned more about his parents' murder and the wizard responsible, though many still flinched at the name. Yes, Dobby whispered. Dobby has heard things, in the Malfoy house. Whispers about why he who must not be named came to Harry Potter's house that night. He was trying to kill me because of a prophecy. Harry asked, his young mind grappling with the concept. Dobby nodded gravely. A prophecy that said Harry Potter would have the power to vanquish the Dark Lord. But Dobby thinks the wizard prophecy and the elf prophecy might be connected. How? The Friend shall restore balance to magic, Dobby quoted. The Dark Lord created the greatest imbalance, using the darkest magic, hurting many beings, wizard and non-wizard alike. Perhaps the Friend's power to vanquish the Dark Lord comes from this balance. It was a complex concept for a 4-year-old, but Harry had been processing extraordinary ideas since the day Dobby first appeared at Privet Drive. Does Professor Dumbledore know about this? He asked. Dobby believes so, the elf replied. But Professor Dumbledore does not know everything about elf magic. Some things were forgotten even by the greatest wizards. We should tell him what you think, Harry decided. Maybe it will help. Their conversation was interrupted by a soft chime indicating someone was requesting entry to their quarters. Harry called permission, and the archway opened to reveal Professor McGonagall looking unusually agitated. "Mr. Potter, please get dressed quickly," she said without preamble. "The headmaster needs to see you immediately." "What's happened?" Harry asked, alarmed by her tone. McGonagall pressed her lips into a thin line. "The Ministry has passed the Magical Dependence Registration Act. All house elves must be registered with the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures by the end of the month." "But that's not fair," Harry protested. "They're not creatures, they're people." "I quite agree," McGonagall said grimly. "Unfortunately, the coalition had enough votes to push it through. There's more, but the headmaster should explain." 20 minutes later, Harry sat in Dumbledore's office, trying to understand the implications of the new law. "The registration itself is not necessarily harmful," Dumbledore explained gently. "But it establishes a precedent for Ministry control over elves that could lead to more restrictive measures in the future." "They want to take my friends away," Harry said flatly. "It wasn't a question." Dumbledore sighed. "Some do, yes. Lucius Malfoy and his coalition have made it clear they believe house elves should be returned to their proper place. But you won't let them?" Harry looked up anxiously. "No, Harry, I won't," Dumbledore assured him. "But our opposition may need to become more strategic. Which brings me to a difficult question." He leaned forward, his blue eyes serious behind his half-moon spectacles. "How would you feel about leaving Hogwarts for a while?" Harry's eyes widened in alarm. "Leave? But this is my home now." "And it will remain your home," Dumbledore said quickly. "But it might be safer for you and the elves to relocate temporarily to a place the Ministry has less direct influence over." "Where?" "I have a brother, Aberforth, who owns property in the mountains, a large estate, quite remote, with extensive magical protections. He's offered it as a sanctuary where you and the elves could live more freely, away from daily Ministry scrutiny, at least until this political situation stabilizes." Harry looked at Dobby, who had been listening intently. "What do you think?" "Dobby thinks." The elf began hesitantly. "Dobby thinks the friend would be safer away from those who wish to control him. But Dobby also thinks Harry Potter needs his education and his wizard friends." "A valid concern," Dumbledore nodded. "Which is why I've arranged for tutors who would visit regularly. And your friend Ron could visit via secure Floo connection." Harry considered this carefully. "Would it be like hiding?" "Because I don't want to hide. That feels like we're doing something wrong, but we're not." "Not hiding," Dumbledore corrected. "Strategic repositioning. Sometimes in chess, one must move a valuable piece to an unexpected square to protect it while preparing a stronger move." Despite his age, Harry understood the analogy. He'd played enough chess with Ron to recognize the concept of temporary retreat. "Okay," he agreed finally. "But only if the elves want to go too. They should choose." "Of course," Dumbledore smiled. "I would expect nothing less from the friend." The mountain estate was nothing like Harry had imagined. He'd pictured something like a larger version of Hagrid's hut, rustic and somewhat primitive. Instead, he found himself in a sprawling stone manor house with multiple wings, extensive grounds, and even a small Quidditch pitch. "Your brother lives here?" he asked Dumbledore in amazement as they arrived via Portkey, a form of magical transportation Harry decided he definitely didn't enjoy. Dumbledore chuckled. "No, Aberforth lives above his pub in Hogsmeade. He inherited this property years ago but rarely visits. He prefers simpler surroundings." "It's huge," Harry observed, watching as hundreds of elves began appearing with soft pops around the grounds, exploring their new temporary home. "Indeed," Dumbledore agreed. "It was originally built as a retreat for an entire extended family. The Dumbledores were quite numerous several generations back. The manor had been closed up for years, but a team of elves had gone ahead to prepare it. The musty smell of disuse was already being replaced with the scent of cleaning potions and fresh air as windows were thrown open and dust vanished with snaps of elf fingers. Harry's bedroom turned out to be a spacious chamber with a four-poster bed similar to the one he'd had at Hogwarts, though this one had deep blue hangings embroidered with silver stars that actually twinkled. The adjoining sitting room held comfortable furniture, bookshelves stocked with children's magical literature, and toys appropriate for a wizard child. "This will be your main living space," Dumbledore explained. "The East Wing has been set up as a schoolroom where your tutors will conduct lessons. The West Wing has accommodations for the elves, though they've insisted on designing that space themselves." "Can I see it?" Harry asked curiously. "Of course. Gorick has been quite secretive about their plans, but I believe they're ready for visitors now." They walked through long corridors lined with portraits of stern-looking wizards and witches who peered curiously at Harry as he passed. The West Wing entrance was marked by an archway similar to the one that had appeared at Hogwarts, requiring Harry to state his name before it allowed entry. What lay beyond took his breath away. The elves had transformed the space into something that resembled a cross between a village and a forest glade. Small, comfortable dwellings of various designs clustered around a central gathering area where a magical fire burned without wood. The ceiling had been enchanted to show the sky outside, and magical plants grew in orderly patterns that somehow enhanced rather than fought against the architectural elements of the manor. "This is brilliant!" Harry exclaimed, watching elves move happily through the space, arranging their personal belongings and greeting each other. "We have recreated something of the old elf way," Gorick explained, approaching with evident pride. "Before binding contracts, elves lived in communities like this, connected to wizards but maintaining our own spaces and traditions." "I had no idea," Dumbledore murmured, looking around with genuine wonder. "Our magical history books mention nothing of this." "Wizard books were written by wizards," Gorick said simply. "Much of elf history was deliberately forgotten." Harry spent the rest of the day exploring the estate with Dobby and several other elves as guides. There was a lake smaller than the one at Hogwarts but still impressive, stocked with magical fish that changed color when they broke the surface. The Quidditch pitch was regulation-sized, though weathered from disuse. Gardens that had once been formal and elegant were overgrown but showed signs of recent attention from gardener elves eager to restore them. By the time Harry returned to the manor for dinner, he was exhausted but excited about their new temporary home. "This place is amazing," he told Dumbledore as they ate in a dining room sized for an extended family but now occupied by just the two of them and several elf attendants. "It's like a whole world of our own." "That's rather the idea," Dumbledore replied. "Here, you and the elves can develop your unique community away from the political pressures of the ministry." "Will you stay too?" Harry asked hopefully. Dumbledore shook his head regretfully. "I must return to Hogwarts most of the time. My absence would be too conspicuous, and I need to continue advocating for elf rights in the Wisengamot. But I will visit regularly, and I've arranged for trusted individuals to stay here as adult supervision." "Who?" Harry asked, taking a large spoonful of treacle tart that an elf had just served him. "Primarily Remus Lupin, who was a close friend of your parents. He'll be your main tutor and guardian while you're here. He should arrive tomorrow." "Did he know my mum and dad well?" Harry asked eagerly. "Very well indeed. He, your father, and two others were inseparable at Hogwarts. I'm sure he has many stories to share." After dinner, Dumbledore had to return to the castle, leaving Harry in the care of the elves. As Dobby helped him prepare for bed, Harry found himself thinking about everything that had happened since that fateful morning at Privet Drive. "Dobby," he asked as the elf tucked him in, "do you think we did the right thing? Running away instead of staying to fight the bad laws?" Dobby considered this carefully. Dobby thinks, sometimes the bravest thing is knowing when to step back. Harry Potter is still very young, even if he is the friend. Harry Potter will grow stronger here, learn more, prepare for the greater challenges ahead. What greater challenges? Dobby's expression grew serious. The prophecies speak of balance restored, but such things never come easily. The Dark Lord's followers still wish to maintain their power. And the Dark Lord himself, many elves believe he is not truly gone. Voldemort might come back. Harry asked, a chill running through him despite the warm blankets. It is possible, Dobby admitted. But when that day comes, Harry Potter will not face him alone. The friend will have allies, elf and wizard alike. Harry nodded, comforted by the thought. We're stronger together. Yes, Dobby agreed, extinguishing the lamps with a snap of his fingers. That is what the friend teaches us. That is why some fear Harry Potter more than they feared even the Dark Lord. Because I want everyone to be equal? Harry asked, yawning widely. Because Harry Potter shows that true power comes not from control over others, but from friendship and choice, Dobby corrected gently. And that, Harry Potter, is the most revolutionary idea of all. The arrival of Remus Lupin the next day marked the beginning of a new phase in Harry's education. The shabby-looking wizard with premature grey in his light brown hair seemed nervous when he first met Harry, his amber eyes suspiciously bright. "You look so much like James," he said hoarsely. "But you have, my mother's eyes," Harry finished with a grin. "Everyone says that." Lupin laughed, relaxing slightly. "I suppose they do. It's true, though. Lily had the most remarkable green eyes, just like yours." It didn't take long for Harry to warm up to his new tutor. Remus was patient, kind, and possessed a quiet sense of humor that appealed to Harry's own developing wit. More importantly, he seemed genuinely fascinated by Harry's connection to the elves, treating them with respect rather than the condescension Harry had observed in some other wizards. "The magical theory implications alone are extraordinary," he remarked to Gorick after watching Harry perform a bit of elf-style magic. Wandless channeling at his age, and with such precision. "The friend bridges traditions," Gorick replied, now a familiar refrain. "Harry Potter does not separate magics as wizards have done for centuries." "Yes, but the question is why?" Remus mused. "Is it something inherent to Harry specifically, or could other wizard children learn this approach if taught from a young age?" This philosophical question led to an unexpected experiment. During Ron Weasley's next visit via secured Flook connection, Dobby and Pinky attempted to teach both boys a simple elf charm for finding lost objects. Harry managed it easily, causing a misplaced chess piece to zoom into his outstretched hand from behind a sofa cushion. Ron struggled, his face scrunching with concentration as he snapped his fingers repeatedly with no result. "I can't do it," he said finally, disappointed. "Try once more," Remus suggested. "But this time, don't think about making the magic happen. Think about the connection between you and the object, feel that it wants to be found, that it belongs in your hand." Ron gave him a skeptical look but tried again, closing his eyes and focusing as instructed. To everyone's surprise, the chess piece twitched visibly, though it didn't fly to him as Harry's had done. "I saw it move," Harry exclaimed excitedly. "Blimey," Ron breathed, staring at his own hand in wonder. "I did magic. Without a wand." "Fascinating," Remus murmured, while the elves exchanged significant looks. "The friend's magic affects those close to him," Gorick observed quietly. Just as the prophecy suggested. This discovery led to a new dimension in Harry's education. While he continued standard lessons in reading, writing, basic potions, magical theory, and even Muggle subjects like mathematics, he also participated in experimental sessions where Remus and the elves explored the boundaries between wizard and elf magic. They discovered that while Harry had an unusual aptitude for both traditions, he wasn't unique in his ability to bridge them. Ron continued his occasional lessons when he visited, making slow but steady progress. Even Remus himself, an accomplished adult wizard, found he could perform minor wandless magic using elf techniques after persistent practice. "It's as if we've been artificially limiting ourselves," Remus remarked one evening as he and Harry sat by the fire, reviewing the day's progress. "Wizards have become so dependent on wands that we've forgotten there are other ways to channel magic. Why do wizards use wands anyway?" Harry asked, idly practicing by making a quill float above his palm without touching it. Precision and power, Remus explained. Wands allow us to focus magical energy with greater accuracy and amplify our innate abilities. But perhaps there's a cost to that specialization, a disconnection from the more intuitive aspects of magic that elves have maintained. These philosophical discussions might have seemed beyond a 4-year-old, but Harry absorbed them eagerly. His unusual upbringing, first the neglect at the Dursleys, then the intense attention from elves and wizards, had created a child with both emotional sensitivity and intellectual curiosity beyond his years. As autumn deepened into winter, the mountain estate became a sanctuary of learning and growth. The elves established their own council for governance, with Gorick as the primary elder but decisions made communally. They divided responsibilities for maintaining the estate, supporting Harry's education, and developing their own cultural practices that had been suppressed under binding contracts. Some elves discovered talents beyond domestic service. Pinkie revealed an extraordinary gift for healing magic, establishing an infirmary where she treated both elf and human ailments. A grizzled old elf named Wobble turned out to be a master carver, creating intricate wooden toys and furniture. Dozens more found new interests or revived ancient elf crafts that had been forgotten during centuries of enforced servitude. Meanwhile, the political situation continued to evolve. Dumbledore brought news during his regular visits, keeping Harry and the elves informed while shielding them from direct involvement. The registration process has been completed, he reported during a December visit, warming his hands by the fire after a cold journey. All house elves are now officially recorded in the Ministry census. Even us? Harry asked, concerned. Yes, though I submitted the paperwork myself, listing your current location simply as, in residence with Harry Potter at a secure location. Minister Fudge wasn't pleased with the vagueness, but given your status as the boy who lived, he couldn't push too hard for details without seeming threatening. What about the coalition? Remus asked. Has Malfoy made any progress with his agenda? Dumbledore's eyes twinkled. Actually, Lucius has found himself rather distracted lately. It seems the Department of Magical Law Enforcement took a keen interest in certain information provided by former Malfoy house elves regarding dark artifacts in his possession. Harry's eyes widened. They found the secret room. Indeed they did, Dumbledore confirmed. Along with several items that should not have been in a private citizen's possession. Lucius is currently devoting most of his energy to legal defenses rather than political offensives. Good, Harry said firmly. He was mean to Dobby. The winter months passed in a rhythm of lessons, experiments, and visits from Harry's growing circle of friends. Besides Ron and occasionally the other Weasley children, Harry was introduced to Neville Longbottom, a shy boy his age whose grandmother was an ally of Dumbledore's in the Wizengamot, and Susan Bones, niece of Amelia Bones from the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Though the children were initially brought together by their parents' political connections, they quickly formed genuine friendships. Neville was fascinated by the magical plants the elves cultivated, while Susan shared Harry's interest in justice and fairness for magical beings. My auntie says house elves should have rights just like goblins do, she informed Harry seriously during one visit. She says the old laws are just ways to keep power where it's always been. By his 5th birthday in July, Harry had grown into a confident, curious child with an unusual magical education and perspective. He could read simple books, perform basic wandless magic, fly a training broomstick with extraordinary skill, and converse thoughtfully about complex ideas like fairness and freedom. Most remarkably, he had developed a genuine community around himself, elves who followed him by choice, wizard friends who valued him for himself rather than his fame, and adult mentors who guided without controlling. On the evening of his birthday, after a celebration that included a cake baked by Molly Weasley, presents from his friends, and a special elf ceremony where he was formally recognized as a friend of elfkind, Harry stood with Dobby on a balcony overlooking the estate. The grounds below were illuminated with hundreds of magical lights created by the elves, glowing spheres that floated among the trees and gardens, casting a warm golden glow over the summer night. Elves moved among them, still celebrating in their own way, their high voices carrying faintly on the breeze. Are you happy, Harry Potter? Dobby asked, standing beside him. Harry nodded, watching the lights with contentment. It's the best birthday ever, he said simply. Better than I ever imagined when I lived with the Dursleys. Dobby is glad, the elf said, his large eyes shining with emotion. Dobby remembers the day he first saw Harry Potter, so small, so sad, cooking for those terrible muggles. Dobby knew then that the prophecy was true. The friend had come, and magic would never be the same. I still don't really understand what I'm supposed to do, Harry admitted. Restore balance to magic, that's a big job for a kid. The friend does not need to understand everything now, Dobby assured him. The friend grows in wisdom as he grows in years. The change has already begun, just by Harry Potter being Harry Potter. They stood in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the lights below. Then Harry asked, "Do you think we'll go back to Hogwarts soon?" "I like it here, but I miss the castle sometimes." "Professor Dumbledore believes it will be safe to return for the autumn," Dobby replied. "The political situation has shifted. The nasty Malfoy man has lost much influence. The minister is more willing to listen to Professor Dumbledore now." "Good," Harry said, yawning. "I want to see the giant squid again. And Hagrid. And the moving staircases." Dobby smiled, recognizing the signs of a tired 5-year-old despite Harry's advanced development in other areas. Time for Harry Potter to sleep. Tomorrow is another day. As Dobby tucked him into bed, Harry's thoughts drifted to the future. Hogwarts, learning more magic, eventually getting his own wand, though he wasn't sure he really needed one anymore, making more friends, growing up to be the wizard and friend he was meant to be. "Dobby," he murmured, already half asleep. "Thanks for finding me." Dobby did not find Harry Potter, the elf corrected gently. The magic led Dobby to the friend. But Dobby is thankful every day that it did. Harry smiled sleepily. "Me too." As Harry drifted into dreams, Dobby watched over him, reflecting on the extraordinary journey they had begun that day at Privet Drive. The path ahead would not be easy, there were dark forces still at work in the wizarding world, and the prophecies spoke of challenges yet to come. But the friend was growing stronger every day, surrounded by those who loved him for himself, not just his destiny. And that, Dobby thought as he quietly dimmed the lights, made all the difference in the world. Chapter 3, The Friend Ascendant. September 1st, 1991 dawned clear and bright over platform 9 3/4. The Hogwarts Express gleamed scarlet against the billowing steam, and the platform buzzed with the usual chaos of students reuniting, parents fussing, and owls hooting indignantly in their cages. But this year, something was different. A space cleared near the middle of the platform as people stepped back, whispering and pointing. Harry Potter had arrived, and he wasn't alone. "Blimey, they're actually here," someone muttered. "I thought the papers were exaggerating. How many elves does he have?" Harry strode forward, ignoring the stares. At 11, he was still on the small side, a lingering effect of the Dursleys' neglect, but he carried himself with quiet confidence. His wild black hair still refused any attempt at taming, and his green eyes sparkled with excitement behind round glasses. Beside him walked Dobby, no longer wearing the pillowcase of his enslaved days but a properly tailored outfit of deep blue with silver trim. Behind them came a contingent of 12 house elves, all similarly dressed in variations of blue and silver, all walking with heads high and shoulders straight, the posture of free beings rather than servants. "Harry! Over here!" Ron Weasley waved frantically from where he stood with his family. Harry broke into a grin and headed their way, his elf companions following smoothly. "Ron! I was hoping to find you." They clasped hands in a half-handshake, half-hug of boys who've been friends for years but are suddenly self-conscious about showing too much affection in public. "Figured we'd ride together," Ron said. "Mum's been mental all morning, worried we'd miss the train." "Ronald," Molly scolded, then turned to Harry with a warm smile. "Harry, dear, how wonderful to see you. Are you excited for your first year?" Yeah, brilliant to finally be going as a student, Harry replied. After spending so much time at the castle during his younger years, he'd been impatiently counting down to his official enrollment. The whistle blew, and students began scrambling for the train. Better hurry, Arthur advised. Find a good compartment before they're all taken. Harry turned to his elf contingent. You don't all have to ride the train. You can apparate directly to Hogwarts if you want. Dobby will stay with Harry Potter, his friend said immediately. Me too, added Pinky. The rest of us will prepare your quarters at the castle, Gorick decided after a brief consultation with the others. With soft pops, 10 elves vanished, leaving just Dobby and Pinky. They boarded the train just as it began to move, finding an empty compartment near the back. Ron immediately launched into a story about the chaos at the Burrow that morning, while Harry listened with the half-attention of someone who's heard many Weasley family sagas before. And then Fred and George somehow turned Percy's prefect badge into a rubber chicken, and he went absolutely mental. The compartment door slid open, interrupting Ron's tale. A girl with bushy brown hair and rather large front teeth stood in the doorway. Has anyone seen a toad? A boy named Neville's lost one, she said in a bossy sort of voice. Neville Longbottom? Harry asked, perking up. Is he here? Yes, he's just down the corridor, the girl replied, then did a double take as she noticed Dobby and Pinky. Oh. Are those house elves? I've read all about them in Hogwarts, a history, but the book said they stay in the kitchens and aren't usually seen by students. Most elves, yes, Harry agreed. But Dobby and Pinky are my friends. They go where I go. The girl's eyes widened. You're Harry Potter. Yeah, that's me, Harry said, trying not to sound tired. He'd dealt with this reaction for years. I've read all about you too. You're in Modern Magical History and The Rise and Fall of the Dark Arts and Great Wizarding Events of the 20th Century. Those books get a lot wrong, Harry said with a shrug. You shouldn't believe everything you read. The girl looked affronted at the suggestion that books might contain inaccuracies. Well, I'm Hermione Granger. And you are? She turned to Ron. Ron Weasley, he mumbled through a mouthful of chocolate frog. Pleasure, she said, not sounding entirely sincere. You might want to change into your robes soon. I expect we'll be arriving shortly. With that, she departed, continuing her search for Neville's toad. Mental, that one, Ron observed. She's just nervous, Harry said. He'd met enough new people over the years to recognize social anxiety masked by bossiness. She's Muggle-born, probably feels like she has to prove herself. Ron raised an eyebrow. How'd you know she's Muggle-born? Harry shrugged. Just a feeling. The truth was more complicated. Over the years, Harry's unusual magical sensitivity had continued to develop. He didn't just know elves' true names anymore, he'd developed a knack for sensing magical signatures, reading them like subtle cues about a person's background and abilities. It wasn't mind reading, just an intuitive understanding that most wizards lacked. The journey continued with visits from several familiar faces. Neville found them, toadless but happy to see Harry again. They'd maintained their friendship over the years, though they hadn't seen each other as often as Harry and Ron. The Weasley twins popped in briefly, already plotting mischief for the new term. Then the compartment door slid open again, revealing a pale boy with sleek blonde hair, flanked by two larger boys with mean expressions. So it's true, the blonde boy drawled. Harry Potter's finally coming to Hogwarts properly. These are Crabbe and Goyle. He gestured carelessly to his companions. And I'm Malfoy. Draco Malfoy. Ron gave a slight cough that might have disguised a snicker. Draco's eyes flashed. Think my name's funny, do you? No need to ask who you are. Red hair, hand-me-down robes, you must be a Weasley. Better a Weasley than a Malfoy, Harry said coolly, standing up. At least the Weasleys don't keep dark artifacts under their drawing room floor. Draco's pale face flushed pink. The Ministry raids on Malfoy Manor had become public knowledge, seriously damaging Lucius Malfoy's reputation even though he'd managed to avoid Azkaban through expensive legal maneuvering. "You think you're so special, don't you, Potter?" Draco snarled. "Swanning around with your liberated elves, changing rules that have stood for centuries." "I didn't change any rules," Harry replied calmly. "Magic did that. Your family's elves chose freedom. Maybe ask yourself why." Draco's eyes darted to Dobby, who was watching the exchange with an uncharacteristically stern expression. "Young Master Malfoy should leave now," Dobby said quietly but firmly. "You don't give me orders, elf," Draco snapped, but his bravado was clearly faltering. "Dobby doesn't need to," Harry said. "I'm asking you to go, Malfoy. This conversation isn't going anywhere good." For a moment, Draco looked like he might argue further, but something in Harry's steady gaze made him think better of it. "Come on," he muttered to Crabbe and Goyle. "We're wasting our time." After they left, Ron let out a low whistle. "That was brilliant, Harry. Did you see his face when you mentioned the dark artifacts?" Harry didn't feel particularly triumphant. His dad's the problem, not him. He's just repeating what he's heard at home. "Still a git, though," Ron insisted. "Young Master Malfoy is confused," Dobby observed quietly. "He was raised to believe certain things about elves, about power, about blood. The friend understands this is not the boy's fault." Harry nodded. He'd spent enough time with elves to absorb some of their perspective on wizards, seeing them as products of their upbringing rather than inherently good or bad. As the countryside gave way to mountains and forests, they changed into their school robes. The train began to slow, and a voice echoed through the compartment, "We will be reaching Hogwarts in 5 minutes' time. Please leave your luggage on the train, it will be taken to the school separately." "This is it," Ron said excitedly, stuffing the last of his sweets into his pockets. Harry felt a flutter of nerves despite his familiarity with Hogwarts. This was different, he wasn't just a special case anymore, living at the castle under Dumbledore's protection. Now he was a proper student, and for all his unusual background, this marked a step toward a more normal wizarding childhood. They disembarked into the cool night air. A familiar voice boomed over the crowd, "Fur's years. Fur's years over here. Hagrid." Harry called happily, spotting the towering gamekeeper holding a lantern aloft. "All right there, Harry." Hagrid beamed down at him. "Ready for your official start?" "Been waitin' a long time for this." The first years followed Hagrid down a steep, narrow path toward the lake, where a fleet of small boats awaited them. Harry, Ron, Dobby, and Pinky took one boat, while Hermione and Neville joined 2 other students in another. "No more than 4 to a boat," Hagrid called, then noticed the elves. I guess the elves don't count the same. Dumbledore said yet have some with ya." The boats glided across the black water of the lake. As they rounded a bend, Hogwarts came into view, its windows blazing with welcoming light, turrets and towers rising majestically against the starry sky. Even Harry, who had lived there for stretches of his childhood, caught his breath at the sight. "It's home," he whispered, and Dobby squeezed his hand in silent understanding. When they reached the underground harbor and climbed a flight of stone steps to the huge oak front door, Hagrid raised his gigantic fist and knocked 3 times. The door swung open to reveal Professor McGonagall, looking as stern and impressive as ever in emerald green robes. "The Fur's years, Professor McGonagall," said Hagrid. "Thank you, Hagrid. I will take them from here." Her eyes found Harry's, and she gave him the briefest hint of a smile before resuming her stern expression. McGonagall led them across the flagged stone floor and into a small, empty chamber off the hall. She explained about the 4 houses, the sorting ceremony, and the importance of house points. Harry listened with half an ear, having heard all this before during his earlier time at the castle. "What about them?" a student suddenly asked, pointing at Dobby and Pinky. McGonagall's lips thinned slightly. Mr. Potter's elf companions have special permission to attend Hogwarts with him. They will not be sorted into houses but will remain with Mr. Potter regardless of his placement. Are there any other questions? There weren't. Most students were too nervous about the impending sorting to worry about Harry's unusual entourage. After McGonagall left to prepare the Great Hall, whispers broke out among the first years. How exactly do they sort us? Some sort of test, I think. Fred said it hurts a lot, but I think he was joking. Harry caught Ron's eye and grinned. The twins had been feeding Ron outlandish stories about wrestling trolls, but Harry knew perfectly well it was just a matter of trying on the sorting hat. Then something happened that made him jump. Several students screamed as about 20 ghosts streamed through the back wall, pearly white and slightly transparent, deep in conversation. Forgive and forget, I say, a fat monk was saying. We ought to give him a second chance, my dear friar, haven't we given Peeves all the chances he deserves? He gives us all a bad name and you know, he's not really even a ghost, the ghost wearing a ruff and tights noticed the first years. I say, what are you all doing here? New students, said the fat friar, smiling around at them. About to be sorted, I suppose. A few people nodded mutely. Hope to see you in Hufflepuff. My old house, you know. Move along now, said a sharp voice. Professor McGonagall had returned. The sorting ceremony is about to start. She led them into the Great Hall, where thousands of candles floated above 4 long tables filled with students. At the top of the hall was another long table where the teachers sat. Harry spotted familiar faces, tiny Professor Flitwick, Professor Sprout with her flyaway hair, Hagrid at the end of the table raising his goblet to Harry. But there were new faces too, including a nervous-looking man with a purple turban. As Harry's gaze fell on him, a sharp pain lanced through his scar. He winced, his hand flying to his forehead. You okay? Ron whispered. Yeah, just a headache, Harry murmured, but something felt wrong. That professor. There was something off about his magical signature, something Harry couldn't quite read. McGonagall placed a 4-legged stool in front of the first years and put the patched, frayed sorting hat on top of it. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then the hat twitched, a rip near the brim opened wide like a mouth, and it began to sing. Its song explained the qualities of each house: brave Gryffindor, loyal Hufflepuff, wise Ravenclaw, and cunning Slytherin. When it finished, the hall burst into applause. So we've just got to try on the hat. Ron whispered to Harry, relieved. I'll kill Fred, he was going on about wrestling a troll. The sorting began with Abbott, Hannah, who became a Hufflepuff. Harry watched nervously as his peers were sorted one by one. Hermione Granger became a Gryffindor, to Ron's evident dismay. Neville Longbottom also went to Gryffindor after a long deliberation. Draco Malfoy was sorted into Slytherin the instant the hat touched his head. Then, finally, Potter, Harry. Whispers broke out like little hissing fires all over the hall as Harry stepped forward, Dobby and Pinky staying close behind him. Potter, did she say? The Harry Potter. Look at those elves with him. Harry sat on the stool, and the last thing he saw before the hat dropped over his eyes was the hall full of people craning to get a good look at him. Next second he was looking at the black inside of the hat, waiting. Said a small voice in his ear. Difficult. Very difficult. Plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind either. There's talent, oh my goodness, yes, and a nice thirst to prove yourself, now that's interesting. But what's this? Oh, how fascinating. The elf friend of prophecy. I haven't seen this kind of magical bond in, well, not since the founders themselves. Harry gripped the edges of the stool, thinking, not Slytherin, not Slytherin. Not Slytherin, said the small voice. Are you sure? You could be great, you know, it's all here in your head, and Slytherin would help you on the way to greatness, no doubt about that. No. Well, if you're sure, better be Gryffindor. Harry heard the hat shout the last word to the whole hall. He took off the hat and walked shakily toward the Gryffindor table, where he was receiving the loudest cheer yet. Percy the prefect got up and shook his hand vigorously, while the Weasley twins yelled, "We got Potter! We got Potter!" Dobby and Pinky followed, taking positions behind Harry's seat. This caused another round of whispers throughout the hall, but the Gryffindors, many of whom had met Harry and his elves over the years through the Weasleys, made room without much fuss. Ron was sorted into Gryffindor minutes later, to Harry's delight. As the feast appeared on the golden plates, conversation flowed easily, with many students curious about Harry's unique situation. "So the elves really just follow you around?" asked Seamus Finnegan, a sandy-haired boy. "Dobby and Pinky do," Harry explained between bites of roast potato. "The others stay mostly in our quarters or help around the castle. They're free to make their own choices." "Free elves," marveled Dean Thomas. "My stepdad's a Muggle civil rights lawyer, he'd have a field day with wizarding labor laws." Harry grinned. He liked these new perspectives from his Muggle-raised classmates, who often saw the absurdities of wizarding traditions that purebloods took for granted. As the feast progressed, Harry glanced up at the high table. Hagrid was drinking deeply from his goblet. Professor McGonagall was talking to Professor Dumbledore, who caught Harry's eye and gave a small nod of acknowledgement. The nervous young man in the purple turban was talking to a teacher with greasy black hair and a hooked nose. It happened again, a sharp pain shot across the scar on Harry's forehead. "Ouch!" Harry clapped a hand to his head. "What is it?" asked Percy Weasley. "And nothing." The pain had gone as quickly as it came. "Who's that teacher talking to the man with the turban?" he asked Percy. "That's Professor Snape. He teaches potions, but he doesn't want to. Everyone knows he's after the Defense Against the Dark Arts job. And that's Professor Quirrell, who's got it this year. No wonder he's looking so nervous." Harry watched Snape for a moment. He knew the name. Remus had mentioned him as a contemporary from their school days, though never in much detail. But it was Quirrell who made Harry uneasy, though he couldn't explain why. After dessert, Dumbledore got to his feet, and the hall fell silent. "Just a few more words now that we are all fed and watered. I have a few start-of-term notices to give you." He proceeded to warn them about the Forbidden Forest, remind them that magic wasn't allowed in corridors, and announce Quidditch trials. And finally, Dumbledore continued, "I must address something many of you have already noticed. As some of you may know, Mr. Harry Potter has a unique relationship with house elves due to an ancient magic. Several elves will be accompanying him throughout his time at Hogwarts. They are not servants but free beings who have chosen to follow Mr. Potter. I ask that you treat them with the same respect you would show your fellow students." Murmurs rippled through the hall. At the Slytherin table, Draco Malfoy and several others looked openly disgusted. Additionally, the third-floor corridor on the right-hand side is out of bounds to everyone who does not wish to die a very painful death. A few people laughed, but Harry wasn't one of them. He knew Dumbledore well enough to recognize when he was deadly serious. "And now, before we go to bed, let us sing the school song." Dumbledore gave his wand a little flick, and a long golden ribbon flew out of it, twisting itself into words. Everyone picked their favorite tune, and off we go. The school bellowed the bizarre lyrics, finishing at different times until only the Weasley twins were left singing to a very slow funeral march. "Ah, music," Dumbledore said, wiping his eyes. "A magic beyond all we do here. And now, bedtime. Off you trot." The Gryffindor first years followed Percy through the chattering crowds, out of the great hall, and up the marble staircase. Harry's legs were heavy with exhaustion and good food, but his mind was racing with impressions and questions. Why had his scar hurt? What was hidden in the third-floor corridor? At the very end of the corridor hung a portrait of a fat lady in a pink silk dress. "Password," she said. "Caput Draconis," said Percy, and the portrait swung forward to reveal a round hole in the wall. They all scrambled through it. Neville needed a leg up, and found themselves in the Gryffindor common room, a cozy, round room full of squashy armchairs. First-year dormitories are up these stairs, Percy directed, pointing to 2 spiral staircases. Boys on the left, girls on the right. Your belongings have already been brought up. What about Dobby and Pinky? Seamus asked, glancing at the elves. Special accommodations have been arranged, Percy explained. Professor McGonagall will show them shortly. On cue, McGonagall appeared through the portrait hole. Potter, a word. Harry followed her to a corner of the common room, Dobby and Pinky at his heels. The other students pretended not to listen but failed completely at being subtle about it. As discussed with the headmaster, your elf companions have their own space adjacent to the boys' dormitory, McGonagall explained quietly. There's a connecting door from your dormitory that only you and they can open. The castle has adapted to accommodate this unusual arrangement. Harry smiled, remembering how Hogwarts had created special quarters for him and the elves years ago. The castle itself seemed to recognize and support the bond between Harry and the elves. Thank you, Professor, he said sincerely. You're welcome, Potter. She hesitated, then added, I am pleased to have you in my house. Your parents would be proud. With that surprisingly personal comment, she swept away, leaving Harry feeling warm inside despite his exhaustion. Up in the first-year boys' dormitory, 5 four-poster beds hung with deep red, velvet curtains awaited them. Their trunks had been brought up already. Too tired to talk much, they pulled on their pajamas and fell into bed. Great food, isn't it? Ron muttered to Harry through the hangings. Feels weird being here properly after visiting all those years. Get some sleep. Night. Night, Ron, Harry replied. He noticed a door in the wall beside his bed that hadn't been there when they entered, the connection to the elf quarters. Dobby and Pinky bid him good night and passed through it, leaving Harry alone with his thoughts. As he drifted off to sleep, Harry couldn't shake the feeling that something important was beginning. He'd been the boy who lived and the elf friend for years now, but somehow, becoming a Hogwarts student made everything more real. More official. Like he was finally stepping into the role he was meant to play. Classes began the next morning, bringing new challenges and experiences. Harry found he had a mixed relationship with his schoolwork. Years of tutoring from Remus and the elves had given him a solid foundation in magical theory, but the structured approach of classroom learning was different from his more intuitive education. In Transfiguration, Professor McGonagall started them off trying to turn matches into needles. Most students struggled, but Harry, who had practiced wandless transformation with elf magic, found it almost too easy with a wand. His match became a perfect needle on the first try. Excellent work, Mr. Potter, McGonagall said, looking both pleased and unsurprised. 5 points to Gryffindor. Perhaps you could help your classmates. Hermione Granger, who had managed a partial transformation, looked at Harry with a mixture of admiration and competitive frustration. How did you do that so quickly? She demanded as they practiced. I've read all the theory and practiced the wand movement exactly as described in A Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration. That's part of the problem, Harry explained, helping her adjust her grip. You're thinking too much about the mechanics. Magic isn't just about precise wand movements, it's about intention and visualizing what you want to happen. Hermione frowned. That's not what the books say. Books don't know everything, Harry said with a shrug. Try closing your eyes for a second. Feel your magic connecting to the match. See it wanting to become a needle. Skeptically, Hermione followed his instructions. When she opened her eyes and tried again, the match transformed, not perfectly, but much better than before. I did it, she exclaimed, then looked at Harry with new respect. Where did you learn that approach? It's not in any of the standard texts. Elf magic, Harry said simply. They don't use wands, so they focus on intention. I found mixing both approaches works best. This exchange marked the beginning of a tentative friendship with Hermione. Though sometimes bossy and obsessed with rules, she was genuinely curious about Harry's unique magical education and eager to learn any technique that might help her excel. Charms with Professor Flitwick and herbology with Professor Sprout went similarly well. Harry's years of informal learning gave him advantages, though he was careful not to show off. He remembered Remus's advice: true skill isn't about proving you're better than others, it's about helping everyone rise together. Defense against the dark arts, however, proved disappointing. Professor Quirrell's classroom smelled strongly of garlic, which everyone said was to ward off a vampire he'd met in Romania. His turban, he told them, had been given to him by an African prince as a thank you for getting rid of a troublesome zombie, but no one really believed this story. More troubling to Harry was the way his scar prickled painfully whenever Quirrell turned his back to the class. There was something wrong with the professor's magical signature, like it was doubled somehow, overlapping in a way Harry had never sensed before. "Dobby," Harry whispered during one lesson, while Quirrell was stammering about counter-jinxes, "do you feel anything strange about Professor Quirrell?" Dobby, who sat quietly at the back of the classroom during lessons, nodded gravely. "Dobby senses dark magic, Harry Potter. Very dark. But Dobby cannot tell where it comes from." This confirmed Harry's suspicions, but he wasn't sure what to do with the information. He considered telling Dumbledore but hesitated. What exactly would he say? That his scar hurt and Quirrell's magic felt wrong? It seemed flimsy evidence of whatever might be happening. The most challenging class proved to be potions, held down in the dungeons with the Slytherins. Professor Snape started the class with roll call, pausing at Harry's name. "Ah, yes," he said softly, "Harry Potter. Our new celebrity." Draco Malfoy and his friends Crabbe and Goyle sniggered behind their hands. Snape finished calling the names and looked up at the class. "You are here to learn the subtle science and exact art of potion making," he began, speaking barely above a whisper, but they caught every word. "As there is little foolish wand-waving here, many of you will hardly believe this is magic. I don't expect you will really understand the beauty of the softly simmering cauldron with its shimmering fumes, the delicate power of liquids that creep through human veins, bewitching the mind, and snaring the senses. I can teach you how to bottle fame, brew glory, even stop her death, if you aren't as big a bunch of dunderheads as I usually have to teach." Silence followed this little speech. Hermione was on the edge of her seat, looking desperate to prove she wasn't a dunderhead. Harry met Snape's gaze steadily, sensing the complex emotions behind the professor's cold exterior: bitterness, old pain, and something specifically directed at Harry that felt personal. "Potter," said Snape suddenly. "What would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood?" Harry knew this one, thanks to his years of lessons with both wizards and elves. "The draught of living death, sir. It's a powerful sleeping potion." Snape's lips curled into a sneer. "Correct. Let's try again. Where would you look if I told you to find me a bezoar?" "In the stomach of a goat, sir. It's a stone that will save you from most poisons." "What is the difference, Potter, between monkshood and wolfsbane?" "They're the same plant, sir, also called aconite. Elves use it in healing poultices for magical burns." Harry added this last bit from his knowledge of elf remedies. Snape's eyes narrowed at the mention of elf practices, but he couldn't fault the answer. "Correct," he said coldly. "Well, why aren't you all copying that down?" There was a sudden rummaging for quills and parchment. As the lesson continued, Snape put them into pairs to mix a simple potion to cure boils. He swept around the room, criticizing almost everyone except Malfoy, whom he seemed to like. When Neville somehow managed to melt Seamus's cauldron, creating a mess that caused angry red boils to spring up on his arms and legs, Snape rounded on Harry. "You, Potter, why didn't you tell him not to add the quills? Thought it would make you look good if he got it wrong, did you?" "That's another point from Gryffindor." This was so unfair that Harry opened his mouth to argue, but Ron kicked him behind their cauldron. "Don't push it," he muttered. "I've heard Snape can turn nasty." As they climbed the steps out of the dungeon later, Harry's mind was racing. Why did Snape hate him so much? What had he ever done to the man? Cheer up, said Ron. Snape's always taking points off Fred and George. Hey, can I come and meet Hagrid with you? Harry had arranged to have tea with Hagrid that afternoon. At 2:55, they left the castle and made their way across the grounds to Hagrid's hut, accompanied as always by Dobby and Pinky. Fong the boarhound bounded out when Hagrid opened the door, nearly knocking Harry over in his enthusiasm. Inside the small wooden house, Hagrid was delighted to meet Ron properly and hear about their first week of classes. Harry told him about Snape's lesson and his apparent dislike of Harry. Rubbish, said Hagrid, though he didn't quite meet Harry's eyes. Why should he? Harry wasn't convinced. There was something Hagrid wasn't telling him, but he let it drop for now. How are the other elves settling in? Hagrid asked, changing the subject. Got what, about 20 of them with ya at the castle now. 23, Harry confirmed. Most stay in our quarters, but some help around the castle. Gorik's been working with Madame Pants in the library, turns out he loves organizing books. Never thought I'd see the day, Hagrid chuckled. House elves workin' alongside wizards as equals, choose in their own jobs. Yevi started quite the revolution, Harry. I didn't start anything, Harry protested, a familiar refrain. Magic did it, not me. Magic through you, Dobby corrected gently. The friend is the channel for the change, even if he does not direct it. As they walked back to the castle for dinner, Ron asked the question Harry knew had been on his mind all week. So, are you going to try out for the Quidditch team? First years never make the house teams, but with your flying skills. Harry grinned. McGonagall already spoke to me about it. She wants me at tryouts next week. Oliver Wood, he's the team captain, is going to give me a special evaluation. Wicked! Ron exclaimed. You'll definitely make it. I've never seen anyone fly like you, even Charlie, and he could have played for England. Flying was one area where Harry's unusual upbringing had given him a clear advantage. While most wizard children didn't get proper brooms until they were older, Harry had been flying regularly since he was 5, under the watchful eyes of elves whose magic could catch him if he fell. By now, he was an exceptionally skilled flyer, combining natural talent with years of practice. Sure enough, after a private flying session observed by McGonagall and Wood, Harry was officially named Gryffindor's new Seeker, the youngest in a century. Fred and George Weasley, who played as beaters on the team, were ecstatic. We're going to win the Quidditch Cup for sure this year, Fred declared during their first team practice. You're bloody brilliant, Harry. Not everyone was pleased with Harry's special treatment, however. When the news leaked that he'd been allowed on the team despite being a first year, some students, particularly Slytherins, complained loudly about favoritism. It's not fair, Draco whined during one particularly tense encounter in the corridor. If Potter gets special permission for Quidditch, why not me? My father says, your father says a lot of things, Malfoy, Harry interrupted wearily. But money and influence aren't the same as skill. Draco's pale face flushed. You think you're so special because of that stupid scar and your elf servants. They're not servants, Harry corrected, his temper rising despite his efforts to stay calm. They're free beings who choose to follow me. Something your family wouldn't understand. This touched a particularly raw nerve. The Malfoys had never recovered their social standing after losing their elves and having their manor raided for dark artifacts. Lucius had managed to avoid prison, but his political influence had waned considerably. You'll get what's coming to you, Potter, Draco sneered. Sooner than you think. Something in his tone made Harry pause. Is that a threat, Malfoy? Just a fact, Draco replied with a smirk before walking away, Crabbe and Goyle lumbering after him. Harry mentioned the encounter to Ron and Hermione later in the common room. Hermione had gradually become part of their circle despite Ron's initial resistance to her bossy personality. Her intelligence and genuine desire to help had eventually won him over, especially when she started helping him with his homework. Malfoy's all talk, Ron dismissed. His dad's been promising revenge for years, but what can he actually do? Dumbledore's here, and you've got a small army of elves watching your back. I don't think we should ignore it, Hermione said seriously. Some of the older students were talking about strange things happening in the castle. Katie Bell said her dormitory was searched while everyone was at dinner. Searched? Harry frowned. For what? She doesn't know. Nothing was taken, just rummaged through. And Angelina Johnson said she saw someone sneaking around the third-floor corridor, you know, the forbidden one, Ron added. Did she see who it was? Harry asked. Ron shook his head. Too dark. But it was definitely an adult, not a student. Harry's mind immediately went to Quirrell and his strange dual magical signature. What was hidden on the third floor that would be worth risking Dumbledore's warning about a painful death? The mystery deepened as Halloween approached. Harry was settling into the rhythm of school life, balancing classes, Quidditch practice, and his continued studies of elf magic with Dobby and the others. His scar continued to prickle uncomfortably during defense against the dark arts, but he'd almost grown used to it. Then came Halloween morning, bringing the delicious smell of baking pumpkin wafting through the corridors. Even better, Professor Flitwick announced in charms that they were ready to start making objects fly, something many had been eager to try since they'd seen him make Neville's toad zoom around the classroom. Professor Flitwick put the class into pairs to practice. Harry was partnered with Seamus, while Ron was unhappily paired with Hermione. It was hard to tell which of them was more annoyed by this arrangement. Now, don't forget that nice wrist movement we've been practicing, squeaked Professor Flitwick, perched on top of his pile of books as usual. Swish and flick, remember, swish and flick. And saying the magic words properly is very important, too. Harry, who could already perform a wandless version of this charm thanks to his elf magic training, found the wand approach strangely restrictive. Still, he obediently practiced the movement with his wand. Wingardium Leviosa, he said, and the feather rose off the desk and hovered about 4 feet above their heads. Oh, well done, cried Professor Flitwick, clapping. Everyone see here, Mr. Potter's done it. Across the room, Ron was having far less success. Wingardium Leviosa, he shouted, waving his long arms like a windmill. You're saying it wrong, Harry heard Hermione snap. It's Wingardium Leviosa, make the gar nice and long. You do it, then, if you're so clever, Ron snarled. Hermione rolled up the sleeves of her gown, flicked her wand, and said, Wingardium Leviosa. Their feather rose off the desk and hovered about level with Harry's. Excellent work, Miss Granger. Professor Flitwick beamed. 5 points to Gryffindor for each of you. Ron was in a very bad mood by the end of the class. It's no wonder no one can stand her, he said to Harry as they pushed their way into the crowded corridor. She's a nightmare, honestly. Someone knocked into Harry as they hurried past him. It was Hermione. Harry caught a glimpse of her face, and was startled to see that she was in tears. I think she heard you, Harry said quietly. So, said Ron, but he looked a bit uncomfortable. She must have noticed she's got no friends. That's not true, Harry objected. She's been hanging out with us. Because you're nice to everyone, Ron muttered. Hermione didn't turn up for the next class and wasn't seen all afternoon. On their way down to the Great Hall for the Halloween feast, Harry and Ron overheard Parvati Patil telling her friend Lavender that Hermione was crying in the girls' bathroom and wanted to be left alone. Ron looked still more awkward at this, but before he could say anything, they entered the Great Hall, where the Halloween decorations put Hermione out of their minds. 1,000 live bats fluttered from the walls and ceiling while 1,000 more swooped over the tables in low black clouds, making the candles and the pumpkins stutter. The feast appeared suddenly on the golden plates, as it had at the start of term banquet. Harry was just helping himself to a baked potato when Professor Quirrell came sprinting into the hall, his turban askew and terror on his face. Everyone stared as he reached Professor Dumbledore's chair, slumped against the table, and gasped, Troll, in the dungeons, thought you ought to know. He then sank to the floor in a dead faint. There was an uproar. It took several purple firecrackers exploding from the end of Dumbledore's "Something went wrong with this response, please try again. Trace ID, 07 Kbeek C082 OK, don't stop here, continue the next chapter. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.